Well, howdy, partners. How you doing? This week's episode was really great. I talked with Dominic, aka Hot Lettuce. He's a Cybergrind musician that I met at a DIY show randomly up in Chicago when I was visiting my friend Nap. Um, and yeah, just I was taking some pictures for the event, and he was I think he was the first musician that played there. Did a really cool set. I'd never been to a DIY show. So yeah, I just started talking to him, and yeah, it was fun. I sent him the pictures, and as I was thinking about guests to come on the podcast, I feel like I'm a pretty curious person, and yeah, I'd never been to a DIY. I think it was my first DIY show, and I knew nothing about it. So yeah, I was kind of fascinated to. So yeah, I guess I kind of just wanted to learn more about that, and I thought, like, this podcast, I don't know, like, I'm definitely gonna have a lot of movie people on, but I'm also looking to have, like, not, I don't want to say like traditional like, but I'm also looking to have, like, I guess not traditional movie people, if that makes sense. Like, the this turned out to be, like, I'm recording this after, so that's why I said howdy, partner, because you'll see me with a beard. I'm now mustachioed. But yeah, the my goal is to interview people who are both big movie fans or big movie experts or whatever. I'd like to talk to all of them, but also, people who don't, like, people who aren't, like, self-described, I don't know, like, movie buffs. And I don't know where, I probably should have asked Dominic. I don't know where he falls on that sort of spectrum or whatever. I think he said his partner was a much bigger movie fan than he was, so looking forward to potentially having his partner on and doing another episode. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. We get into so much stuff. So I was looking at, like, the notes from the podcast, like accessibility in film versus music. We talk a lot about health anxiety. So these are two very big health anxiety movies. Passage of time and its representation, complexity of artistic creation, lasting impact of art on life. I think these are auto-generated, so I hope we do talk about this. I'm pretty sure. Mainly, honestly, what I remember, we talked about Magic the Gathering, health anxiety, Returnal, a lot about the movies, and, just us becoming friends, us meeting. We talked about Chicago. I think we talked about the bear scene up in Chicago. Shout out the bear scene up in Chicago. Like, Hinge experiences I've had. Philip Seymour Hoffman, obviously. And yeah, so the two movies we did this week, I probably should have said this at the beginning, are All That Jazz and Synecdoche, New York. So you also get to Synecdoche. So apologies, because I think I mispronounced Synecdoche about 1,000 times in this episode. So I probably should have looked that up before. It occurred to me that I probably had heard people say it, but I tend to mispronounce words a lot. So yeah, apologies if you are a cringing person when you hear me mispronounce words. Yeah, I think I say Synecdoche about 300,000 times. So yeah, but this is a really fun episode. This is a long one. And I was hoping at one point also to get into, like, a big long, like, 3.5 hour episode. So yeah, this was just a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy it, and let's get into it. Thanks for listening.
Throw some colors on the screen and paint me black and white. I want to see a thief in a gunfight or a heroine wounded in love. You can keep her lighted by an old flame left to frame, so I can read the feeling on her face, half in shadow, and know I felt that too. In danger and in love, you've got the dreams I was dreaming of, and I've got 2 hours to pretend. So I watch a movie with a friend, time's running sideways, and reality's gotta meet me halfway. So I'll meet it here again. Here's the Trading Movies podcast with friends.
Hello. Welcome to Trade Movies Podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm here with Dominic, aka Hot Lettuce, which you can find on Instagram as HotXLettuce, and he is a uncouth cybergrind musician.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Awesome. So I wanted to ask. I was, we always talk about like, you know, uh, how to introduce the guest, what the right thing is, and Cybergrind. What is Cybergrind? Because I wanted to make sure and ask that on the pod.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cybergrind is at its core a subgenre of extreme music, a subgenre of grindcore, and it involves chiptune sort of video gamey kind of sounds. It's mostly synth based. Not every Cybergrind artist is going to be synth based, and not every Cybergrind artist is going to follow the same sort of mold. A lot of Cybergrind artists, due to just the genre of music, are going to sound completely different from one another, but the main kind of core is that it's going to be as heavy as it possibly can be, and it's going to use a lot of synths, a lot of beeps and boops, and it's just the heaviest music you can possibly make using, electronics.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. My one of my housemates, one of my friends is basically a brother to me. He does video game music, and he does it. I think he did, shout out Cicada Sirens. He did Signalis, which is a game that came out last year. So he's always shown me some interesting kind of, when you said like video game typey like chip tunes. That's interesting. So did it like come out of like a bunch of like, was it like the genesis of it like video game fans, or was the genesis of it like just electronic music fans, or both? Or
So I mean, I use video gaming just kind of like as a general like aesthetic that you can kind of to think about when you're thinking about this kind of thing. It's not necessarily video game related all the way. A lot of Cybergrind kind of came out. There's a couple different camps. There's like the agoraphobic nosebleeds of it all, kind of taking the Cybergrind more on the. They are a band, I promise.
I thought that was a term. I thought you're just saying, I was like, that's a really. Like,
I'm just gonna be throwing out stuff, and honestly, it could sound like I could say whatever words, and I can say it's a band, and you can just be like, okay. But no, there's a band called the Agoraphobic Nosebleed that was signed back in the day that kind of was pushing more of the metal, but like had an electronic influence. But you could also kind of see it more in the metalcore of the day, whereas electronic music started getting bigger. There was bands like Breathe Carolina and Attack Attack, kind of more in like the Warped Tour scene, that started mixing electronic music into their metal. And there's bands like Agoraphobic Nosebleed, that were mixing like electronic elements and synths into their grindcore. So it was almost like this natural progression of heavier bands that were kind of adding synth elements as these kind of things became more accessible and more popular. And as recording your own music also became more accessible, I think that was probably like the biggest sort of shift in these sorts of bands kind of coming out, because you had a lot more ability to experiment the more that home production kind of became available, and the more easier it kind of started to become, just as music production started to become easier. You didn't have to have it in your house. You could have it in your house rather. You didn't have to go to a studio. So you weren't beholden to, what you could do in a studio. You could now all of a sudden you can sit in your room and mess with all these different programs, make whatever sounds you wanted. And I think just that level of experimentation really gave way to allowing more experimentation in music. And
Sure.
that's kind of, I think, where Cybergrind started to take hold. Sorry to ramble a little bit there, but there's definitely there's a lot of different aspects of this genre of music, and it's hard to capture it all in one one aspect of it, or one other aspect of it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I honestly, I love learning about that. I'm currently I've been doing, like, along with this podcast, like the little TikTok and YouTube channel where like I review movies, whatnot, and over the last like couple days, I did a video on outfits in like the 1940s, and I don't really know anything about fashion, but like I like cinematography and I like all the dresses and all like the outfits of like that time. And it's currently just like it hit sort of semi-viral on like fashion TikTok or whatever. So like, they're teaching me, like, all the fans of it, like, I don't know what, like, I think it's called a birdcage veil. It's like a half veil and a hat. So like any of that slang terminology, like, it's just all fascinating to learn. So no, I love hearing like that. It's interesting the point you make about the like the explosion of sort of like being able to produce stuff like in the house, and how that led to like different genres. I think a lot of people, it seems like, now I don't know if this is just because like I don't watch as much like indie film as I really should that comes out like nowadays, but it almost feels like it's, I think like it's worse for movies than it is for like music. I think the promise was like delivered, and that I think like there's a broader variety of music, especially that more people have access to than ever before. Like you can do Cybergrind, you can like, if you of course I'm struggling to think of any like weird niche subgenres, but my buddy makes he's doing it, making like horror video game music, and there's like a million different of these genres that people can do because the production is like so democratized. It feels like in movies that hasn't come true as much, where at least to me it seems like a lot of this stuff is like almost like it seems like it's more homogenous now than it's almost ever been before. And yeah, I was thinking, there's a movie I watched that I might send you after called Decoder that my buddy's a real big fan of, from the 80s. And it sort of grew out of like the German electronic EDM. Like I think if you know who the guy, I think is, what is it, FM Einheit, is like this German, if you know it, yeah. So if you know FM Einheit, he's like he's the main star in the movie, and it's like this weird, it's a beautiful looking movie, but I think it's like one of the few actors, like he's one of the only roles he did. But yeah, it's interesting. Do you have any theories on like I mean, do you agree with it, and like do you know why music would be like that as opposed to movies, where it's like, or am I just not watching the movies, you think?
I mean, you kind of hear about, like Skinamarink, for example, being filmed on an iPhone, and like the idea that like film is just as accessible in that way. But I mean, when you look at like the scale of film, and not just filming something, because you can film whatever and put it on YouTube, and so in that way, like there's the kind of similarity of like, you can record whatever, throw it on Spotify, throw it on Bandcamp. The same with YouTube, and I think the similarity of, I think that I know that there's a lot of directors, the people who did Talk to Me, they did YouTube shorts.
Yeah, love that movie.
Fantastic film, and again, that was just people that did YouTube shorts about Ronald McDonald killing people, and it was something that they wanted to do, something they thought was fun, and it kind of led them to that. So it might not be the same in, the way of like, some album that gets thrown on Bandcamp gets a cult following and the band explodes, or, the case of like the band Panchico, if you're familiar, where they had one of their, they recorded a demo in the 90s, had it just sitting at a thrift store in Norwich, and someone found it, put it on 4chan, and the band exploded, and now they're touring the world. I think it happens less in the film world than the music world, just again due to the scale of film. But I do think that it still happens. I think that the accessibility of something like YouTube is kind of a similar thing in that way, where people can upload something that they're doing for fun, doing on the side, and like if the right audience finds it, similarly to what you said with the TikTok about 1940s fashion going viral, it's just the right people that need to find it. And it's the same with Cybergrind. You start uploading your music, and the right people find it, all of a sudden there's a community there. And so I think that's true. I think it's very similar in that way, where it's just a matter of throwing it out there for the right people to find it.
Yeah, that is true. I'd be curious to get your opinion on that. I've been going kind of back and forth with it, because like, so I'm doing my TikTok channel, and then I'm also working on YouTube channel, and I think like probably going to keep, I'm like uploading same things to TikTok and shorts, but I'm planning on doing like longer form YouTube videos of like, I'm going to do like a whole video on my favorite director, Takeshi Kitano, and I might do one on Bob Fosse, who did All That Jazz, which is, we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, I guess it's like, I had been actually thinking about doing one on some big YouTube creators. Like, I guess, yeah, that is a great point. Like, in terms of like whether or not they're films or movies or TV shows, you have like, I don't know if you know John Boyce, who does like these really good, I think it's John Boyce. He does like these excellent sports, like weird sports documentaries about like an announcer saying the word no really loudly when like the Vikings miss the playoffs, and like he'll go into like the detail of it, or he has like this thing of like, I think he invented the concept of like scoregami, which is like tracking every time there's a unique football score. Like if it's like a 42-19 score, it's like, oh, that's never happened. So now there's a whole thing where people keep track of that. Jenny Nicholson's another great one, who does all like the, yeah, she's like, and she's probably like, in terms of documentary, she might be like one of the best documentary, like, I think people like filmmakers to come out in years. Like the 4-hour thing that she did on like the Star Wars theme park last year is just like, that was one of the coolest things I've seen in ages. Like I put that up against any miniseries. Yeah, any miniseries I've seen in like the last like mini documentary series. That could have been on anything. So it's interesting. I wonder if do you think it's a form thing? Because like movies, like at least to me, and it's like maybe they're like, you know, it's like we're used to, it's like they're 90 minutes, 120 minutes, like 3 hours or whatever, but they're like, you see them, they're like with the rest of the movies. But I would imagine music, as a musician, like I would imagine almost musicians might be more open to it because there's been sort of a lot more experimentation with the form of it, like in terms of like song lengths or like song dynamics or anything else. Whereas like we might not consider a Jenny Nicholson movie like a Jenny Nicholson YouTube like video piece of content like a documentary, but I don't understand necessarily why not, right? Like,
absolutely.
Do you think it's like a music versus movie thing or what?
I mean, I think structure is a big part of it. I think that, you know, delivery is, in terms of like where you're watching it, is a big part of it. I think that there's a connotation just with the term YouTube video and video essay. You're gonna kind of, you know, a video essay is a very big term that I use or see used described for those kinds of videos, you know, those 4-hour deep dives into something. And I think it being hosted on YouTube gives it a connotation and give people kind of will take it for that, as opposed to, you know, it's still a 4-hour, it's longer than most movies. Like it's still going into a topic just like any other documentary would. It might not have the same title cards and, you know, ending, and it might just be a person sitting in front of their camera talking the whole time. And, you know, maybe there's like a lack of B-roll or the kind of bells and whistles that you might see in, you know, a fancy documentary, but that doesn't make it less of one. It's interesting that you kind of pose the question of like, what is a movie versus a video essay, or like, you know, musically, like, you know, you have what is an EP versus an album, and what is, you know, you kind of start to get philosophical, I guess, on that. But it's all about the delivery, I think. And, you know, with movies, you know, if you're going to look at a YouTube video and view it as a YouTube video, you know, versus if you're not going to watch that in a theater, you're going to watch it on your phone, you're going to watch it in segments too. You know, I didn't watch that Jenny Nicholson video in one take, you know. You watch a bit here and there. And I think that it's really interesting that, you know, you bring up someone like Jenny Nicholson, who does a very detailed and very in-depth, like that video was so well researched and so well put together, so well paced.
Produced, like with all the costume changes and everything, and like the production the production design of it was incredible, you know.
Yeah, it's still her talking in her room in front of her camera, but like the amount of work that she put in, like again the costume changes, like with the way that she structured it, so that like you really are taken through, you know, her journey of that whole stay, and you're like, I was gripped for the whole 4 hours. And
yeah, it's narratively really well done. Like it's definitely like, you know, the excitement and then the disappointment and like the, you know.
I think it's the topic choice too. You know, a lot of video essays and YouTube videos tend to be like a lighthearted, sillier kind of topic. You know, when you're talking about, you know, a deep dive on a Star Wars hotel, or I love video game essays on speed running, like video game speed running.
Summoning Salt.
Absolutely. Summoning Salt, Carl Jobs, like all of those channels. Summoning Salt especially, where it's like a whole 2 hour, like there's music cues, there's highs and lows, there's a narrative being told.
Yeah. He's really good at that. He's like really, really good at that, I think.
And when you break it down, it's a narrative being told about, you know, someone playing a level of a video game really, really fast.
For like 6,000 hours.
For 6,000 hours, drilling the same level, literally running at a wall, trying to find a place where you can like clip out of bounds and break the game in some way. And it's a 2 hour essay of talking about, you know, a person doing that. Like, but it's still like, it's still produced, it's still edited, it's still like a narrative that is being told. And you know, it's, I think when you talk about the accessibility of film, like that's still filmmaking. I'm not going to go and see that in a theater, point. But like that's still filmmaking. You know, it has all of the tenements of it. Like you're still making film. And I think that like, you know, kind of pushing the definition of what is film in that way. It's an interesting conversation. I would totally
go see that in the theater. He should do like a release on that, because like, it's funny you say, yeah, he like, I hadn't thought of it, but like, yeah, I remember his video, with Arcus, the you know, he I think he holds like 30,000 records or something, something crazy. But for those of you who, I'm hoping there's a bunch of people who saw my fashion videos and are now hearing me hearing us talk about Arcus, ARCUS, shout out Arcus. But he's like this speedrunner who slowly just started developing like a Western aesthetic, and like he just started wearing cowboy hats and bolo ties, big mustache, and he also started like showing more of his personal life. I think he like would do these like making myself a burrito speed runs where he would like eat a burrito every day and try and make it as fast as possible. But yeah, Summoning Salt, as opposed to other creators, I think went like deep into like the character of Arcus and like who he is. Like I think like it shows like as a filmmaker an interest there, which I think is part of the reason why I think he's the best to do it. I've seen like other people do like the speed run like videos, but I think there's only one Summoning Salt. And I think probably honestly similar to like some of these movies, he's like it feels like he's as interested in the people behind it, if not more so than the actual like, you know, glitches and stuff and everything else. Like he always makes sure and like I like reposts like the moment that they beat the records and like how overcome with emotion they are, which is like honestly very like, you can't help but just be like, wow, this is like, it's like people breaking down with happiness. It's like some of the most pure joys you'll ever see are like people
absolutely.
Like, I got a sub 920 in Mario.
And to the common person who like doesn't understand, you know, what you go through with that, you know, you especially if you've never seen one of those videos, you're like, oh, you know, are just playing a video game the same level over and over again to try to do it faster and faster, like trying to maximize it. Like where's the fun in that? To a lot of people that like strips the joy, but to other people, like to these speedrunners, the joy is in the grind and of like, you know, you actually get taken on this emotional journey, you know, when you're like the golf one, the Wii Sports Golf, where you're just like, you're watching someone play Wii Sports Golf, which if you're familiar is not the most entertaining thing, but you're so gripped at like these people's journey of, I'm trying to find the most optimal way to do this. And when they finally do it after years, months of trying to get like 1 second faster and they do it, like you feel that emotion too. Like when you're watching these videos, like you're taken on this journey. And like, that's the beautiful thing that like, you know, you want to do as an artist, whether your art is making Cybergrind and making scary video game beep boop noises, or whether your art is making you know, talking a lot about video games, making, you know, a video about someone who's playing a video game really, really fast. Like the emotion is still being conveyed there. You know, you're still frustrated with Jenny Nicholson while you're watching her like be sat behind a pole during the big Star Wars dinner. And she's like, I'm so excited for this character dinner. And you're like feeling the frustration of like watching her behind that pole. You know, it's the emotion that gets translated, you know, however silly.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's probably a great point to segue into the movies and stuff. So in terms of picks this week, so yeah, I think like the idea of like, yeah, there's something about like the emotion that these people experience, like in speedrunning, or yeah, to your point, Jenny Nicholson's frustration, like being sat behind the pole. It's like if someone cares about it, regardless of what they are or who they are, if it comes across as true, whatever that Norm Macdonald quote is about, like, you know, when he's his last performance on David Letterman, when he's saying like, you know, if something is true, then it's not sentimental, and he tells, you know, David Letterman that he loves him, just like like it's, you know, beautiful moment, like tear inducing. But I think I think that's one of the things probably when people ask me, or when I talk to people about movies and in general, it's like my goal is to be as moved as possible when I watch something, just as like if I fucked up as possible, whatever, like sad as possible, devastated, like there's something about it. And so this was a fun week for me, because like Dominic picked Synecdoche, New York, and I had seen Synecdoche, New York once, and I was like, probably a couple years ago, and I was like, it's gonna be years before I watch this movie again, because like, I want to hear about your thoughts on it for sure. But that movie, when I first saw it, just like devastated me and like just fucked me up. And it's like, it's basically just me. That movie is me on screen, the health anxiety, everything. And so as a partner with that, I wanted to choose, because Dominic's a musician. Another movie that I watched recently that I think is like basically a pair of them. I think there's this whole subgenre of movies called, I don't know what they're called, but like, I heard 8.5 by Fellini is like this. It's supposed to be like something, but it's like sort of self-conscious, like self-referential, kind of surreal, break the fourth wall. Just like movies about like an artist that's in their own head. I think is the reason I wanted to sort of pair these, and especially the health anxiety in both movies, which is was crazy to see. It was crazy to see.
Yeah.
So,
oh goodness.
Yeah, why'd you pick Synecdoche? That's I was excited. I really liked watching, even though it did ruin me again.
Yeah, it's a movie that absolutely ruins your life, and especially watching all that jazz, watching that through for the first time, because I hadn't seen it before this. Watching that through, getting to the end, and being like, oh, I understand completely why he picked this. I see the parallels. But for me, I picked Synecdoche, New York, because it's my absolute favorite movie. Similarly to what you said, it is me on screen wholeheartedly.
Nice to meet me then, I guess. Like, nice to meet a
when you said that, I was like, woof, because not to get too candid, but I guess that's where we're going, especially with a movie like this. I really struggle with health anxiety. I'm absolutely a hypochondriac through and through.
I'm sorry to pick all that jazz.
No, I picked Synecdoche, New York. I did this to myself. Yeah. I absolutely did. And Synecdoche, New York, is a film about an artist who struggles with self-doubt, struggles with wanting their art to be true, real, honest, to be genuine and to be worth it. Someone who struggles with health anxiety constantly, someone who feels the inevitability of everything going wrong, creeping in and trying to get everything that you want to do completed before that happens, and getting lost in that is it's a beautiful and honest film, and it absolutely ruined my life the first time I saw it, and has ruined my life many times since, in a way that no other film has, especially a film that you can watch multiple times over, years down the line, and have a different experience. Charlie Kaufman even said that, he when a film is created, this was in an interview about Synecdoche, New York. When a film is created, it's set, it's done, it's edited, it's out there, but he can give you the gift of watching a film years down the line and having a different experience with it, because you're in a different place in your life, and because of that, you can relate to different aspects of the film, maybe more or less, or in different ways that you did the first time you watched it. And I can see that with All That Jazz too. You watch his decline in All That Jazz, which is very interestingly almost a complete opposite end decline. Well, I'm sure we'll get into it, but he's almost the complete polar opposite of Caden in his decline.
Yeah, it's interesting. Why do you think that? I wrote that in my notes, like a little bit, kind of a similar thing, like, but yeah, why do you think, like, why, like, what's sort of the opposite? Is he like getting smaller, or what do you think?
Well, when you look at Caden is the main character of Synecdoche, New York. He is so consumed with the negative, with his health anxiety. He's so consumed with, this needs to be better. This aspect of the play needs to be more real. These actors need to be more honest. This needs to be, this scene needs to be more true to life. And, he's so obsessed with this, with the minutia. And I think that in the negative, whereas I think that the main character of All That Jazz is a lot more carefree. He doesn't necessarily have that same anxiety that Caden does. He doesn't have that same health anxiety. It comes up at times, sure. But you're watching him, smoke and drink in his hospital room, like, knowing that that's gonna kill him, and yet he's bullshitting the doctors and just pretend he's like, oh, you said I needed some exercise, and as he's sitting there with a woman and a beer in his hand, and it's he kind of has the opposite, whereas Caden is so anxious that he obsesses over everything and he doesn't let himself live. Vincent, right?
Is it Gideon?
Gideon, sorry. Oh my goodness.
Gideon. Is it Bob Gideon? I can't remember what the first name is. I'm always terrible with character names in movies.
Yeah,
he is
too many characters.
Joe Gideon.
Joe Gideon. Okay.
Joe Gideon.
We got
played by the great Roy Scheider.
We got there. Thank you for the assist.
Yeah.
But
no, not at all. Yeah.
But with Joe, he kind of, I think, has a similar outlook and view on life like to Adele, Caden's wife, where Adele is kind of
interesting.
Because Adele in the opening of the film, Adele is coughing, and at the end, spoiler alert, she dies of lung cancer. She kind of she ignores a lot of those issues, I think, and just kind of continues to live her life. Whereas Caden can't live his life because he's so obsessed with, oh, I'm having this issue, or I'm sick, or this isn't good enough, or the other millions of things going wrong in Caden's life at any given time. But I found that the two main characters of the film, it was so interesting to see them almost going about their life in a complete opposite way, but still inevitably meeting the same fate of nothing got finished.
It's I wrote that's a great point. I didn't think about the similarity between Adele and Joe Gideon and all that jazz. I had thought, like, so I had kind of, I'm trying to find my note here, but it's like it's almost like they seemed like the opposite a little, like in terms of like their relationship with love. Like, so this is, again, to get too personal, I had like a nice connection with like a it's gonna be fun on a podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I had a nice connection with a hinge match or whatever, over the last like week and a half, and it was going really well for like the first spin. I was like, wow, this, she's really cool, and I felt strongly, and then sort of throughout the course of this week so I was watching Synecdoche and also City Lights by Charlie Chaplin, because I didn't realize how fucking devastating that movie was, because I put on City Lights like the day before I watched Synecdoche, because I was like looking for a fun thing. But have you seen City Lights by Charlie Chaplin?
I'm not familiar, actually.
Highly recommend, but again, be sure you're in a good place. It's like half just slapstick Chaplin comedy, but the other half is like he made it right after his parents died, and so like it's kind of like him like looking for love from this woman and like trying to love this woman, and like she's sort of like a representation of like, in my opinion, like his like he's basically looking for love from like his mother and his father, like in the whole movie, as represented by like these two characters that he's sort of developing with. And he's also like trying to pretend to be a millionaire, and it's like he's changing it to do it so much, and he just wants someone to love him. And so watching that back to back with Synecdoche was just like, that was the thing that really called out. Maybe it was just in my personal life. That's just like,
but that's the thing with Synecdoche, New York. It's a film
he wants someone to love him.
But it's
was the real tragedy.
Yeah.
It was, oh
God. And it's what I said. No, you're fine. You're fine. It's what I said with how every time you watch it, it's whatever's going on in your life is going to have different parts of the film stick out to you differently. If you're going through it with your love life and emotions, you're gonna connect more with the Hazel storyline. You're gonna kind of see more where the Hazel was a failed relationship, and then he spends the rest of the movie pining after her and realizing how he kind of messed that up. The scene that really, one of the scenes, of course many, the whole movie kills you, but one of the scenes that really, really gets me in Synecdoche, New York, is when he's sitting outside of Hazel's house, and Hazel comes home with her family, and Hazel comes home to talk to him, and he's just like, I want to be there for you. And she's like, I'm fine. Like, my life is good. And he's like, I don't want it to be good. Like, I don't want your life to be good. I want to be able to be here for you. I want to be that rock for you. I want to be emotionally there for you. And she doesn't need it. Like he wants to have that emotional intimacy with her. and she's like, I'm fine. I don't need it. And like it'll show you like, you know, there's someone that you know love in your life, no matter what, if they're comfortable, you know, if they're not in a place where they need you, you know, be it a relationship romantically or otherwise, you know, like she didn't need him. And no matter how much Caden needed her, in her mind, she's like, Caden, I'm okay. Like, that scene in particular really speaks to me. And to someone else watching the movie, that might go right over their heads. You know, it might just be, oh, Caden's desperate.
Yeah. You know, it was I thought there was a real match last night. I didn't even notice the scene the first time and all that jazz. Like, I didn't even remember it. But, like, towards the end, as he's, like, in the last sequence when he goes into the hospital, and he finds the old lady, and he sort of, like, gives her a nice romantic kiss. Mm-hmm. Like, and she's just, like, very thankful and whatever. It's kind of like, to the point about the similarity differences between them. It's like, there's, like, the same scene in Synecdoche where he just wants to put his head on the old woman's shoulder at the end when he's old. Like, after all this time, he's still just like, I feel like the movie is like, he's just constantly looking for like someone that he just wants a shoulder to put his head on and be like loved by someone and be like, you know, you're okay, like unconditionally. Also someone that he's like interested in, which is like another point. It's almost like, I don't know how to like, it's like if they're interested in him, then like if like the woman is interested in him, then it's like almost like, well, he kind of wants like almost like an unavailable woman to be like finally break down and say, okay, like I got you, you can put your, you know, I'll take care, like, you know, take care of you, it's okay. Mm-hmm. But Fosse is like, he's giving the love. He's like, his whole thing is like, he wants to be the one. I say Fosse because it's like autobiographical for the movie, but Gideon, he wants to you know, he wants to be sort of giving the love, which I thought was just a interesting comparison. I kind of wrote last night, it was funny, I wrote a note that said about Gideon when I was watching. I said, everyone loves this guy, I kind of hate him. I was like, you know, because I was like he has like a daughter that just loves him. He has like two women that just are clearly like, you know, the girlfriend, even though he treats him like shit, and his ex-wife, it's like no one after the scene, which by the way, is that, I mean, I think that's probably the best musical number, I think, and that's saying something considering how many good musical, the erotic like nude dance scene. It's probably might be the most impressive thing ever on film besides the ending. I think, like,
oh, absolutely. I was floored by that scene with the flashlights and the way that, like, and that's I think adds to the tragedy of it, because even his ex-wife says, like, tearing up, like, this is your best work.
Yeah. It's like, and that would never happen to Caden, right? That would just never, like, he would.
Adele didn't even go to his opening performance of Death of a Salesman. She stayed up all night getting high with her friend. Like, you know, that would never, you never see that. And it's interesting, like the love that, like, you know, Gideon's constantly being showered with appreciation. And there's one scene in particular that really stood out to me in all that jazz, where everyone's laughing at the jokes. They're doing like a table read sort of thing. Everyone's laughing. Mm-hmm. And the audio goes almost silent, and you only hear the sound effects of you know what Gideon's doing when he gets up.
It's like tapping and shit.
Like all you hear him tap, like only like the sound effects related to like what he's doing, setting stuff down, like, you know, his shirt. You don't hear any of the audio of like the people laughing, and you know that's I guess a similarity you can draw, you know, to Caden, where he's constantly like, you know, fixated on the negative feedback, the negative critiques. You know, the negative feedback he receives on Death of a Salesman, you know, even though a lot of people enjoyed it. Similarly here, he's sitting here and, you know, he can't hear the praise. He can only hear, you know, his own internal struggle. And I love the way that the audio cuts out to kind of illustrate that there.
Yeah. Yeah, they talked about that. I watched the, there's a great, on the Criterion collection, which I have behind me, there's a commentary with the editor, and he talks a lot about focusing on that, and like that as a way of like internalizing it, but it's like, I think he talks about like the panic attack of it, of like trying to get really surreal with it and represent like what it feels like when you're in a room and you can only hear like just your own thing, and then it's like he has no conception this is a great script or like whatever else. It's just or the same thing with like when he's you know, all the people love it, but the only person he cares about is kind of that sort of semi-ridiculous lady on the TV talking about balloons, like, or she has like her, I give this like half a balloon, because she talks about like, oh yeah, the actor was good, but Fosse won't let him do his thing. It's like his direction specifically is the thing that like causes the movie to be worse, which is, yeah, very very similar in that. I also wrote, when he has the hospital stay, I was like, I wrote a note, he even gets a nice hospital stay. Now I really hate him, because it's like, I mean, even just that is like a fantasy of like, I would love to just, spending a month, like, obviously not with like the way it ends and like, heart condition or whatever, but just the idea of like taking a break from it all and being like, oh yeah, I just like, it's almost the opposite of like Caden, where he would like, he would also probably yearn for like a nice hospital stay, but none of his illnesses or maladies even get to a point where it's like he can actually be getting taken care of by someone. And when he goes in the hospital, like the hospital for Bob Fosse, it's like there's like 30 people taking care of him. There's like the doctor saying like they're strategizing, they're trying to fight through it. But all the hospitals in fucking in Synecdoche just get shittier and shittier and like worse and worse. And there's no comfort. There's not even a chair. Like, I think there's one scene where the doctor's sitting down and he's just having to stand there while he's like getting told that like he doesn't get an answer. It's
no, they say I'll send you to another doctor. Like, they'll say, I'm going to send you to an ophthalmologist, and he's like, an ophthalmologist, and he's like, yes, an ophthalmologist, and then he goes to the other one, and which too, the way that those scenes happen, where the doctor will say, I'm going to send you to X, and then he has to like confirm it, because I'm not just saying that, he every single time he's like a blank, and has to like confirm it with the doctor. Like, there's this weird communication prevalent throughout the movie, but specifically when he's talking to his doctors too. That he's, constantly being misunderstood or doesn't understand what they're saying, like that there's this big disconnect there. The medical bits with Synecdoche, New York, as you mentioned, as, someone who also has medical anxiety, I'm happy I'm not just the only one who's going to be talking about this here. But like, it's really, really daunting to, especially with the medical system here in America, to be someone who has medical anxiety and like sharing those with a medical provider. And the coldness and almost just like, not that he doesn't believe him, but like there's just so much like coldness and matter of factness in the way that these doctors, will communicate with Caden. That's just very, it strikes me as someone who's had to deal with that and had to, talk to a doctor and just be like, well, we'll see you in 6 months.
Yeah, that's the, it's funny you say that. The first time I watched this was like at the height of COVID. So like that was definitely the part where it's like Synecdoche, that was definitely the part of it where I was like, oh, this, I should never watch it. Like, because like my ex and I had locked down pretty hard during COVID. And yeah, there was just like, it was still, I think it was still at the point, might have been like pre-vaccines, anything of like, you don't know, like, there's all the rumors about like long COVID or like whatever else. So it's, it was a pretty hard watch for that, just sort of thinking like you might get this thing that's just like, going to slowly break down your body, and then you're just seeing this on screen. I think to your point about the 6 months, the quote I always think about with that is from what's his face, Felix on Chapo Trap House. Shout out Chapo, the podcast. He always talks about like a doctor. The experience of having a doctor in America is like it's a guy that you see every 6-12 months, and he tells you that you need to lose weight, and that's it. And it's like there's no. Yeah, it is like, it's one of the better portrayals of the medical system. Probably the average experience for like most people of just like, you go to it, you don't really get an answer. The system is like specifically set up for you not to get an answer. Like, yeah, I'm almost thankful he didn't go too much into like the monetary side of it. Because I think that might have even been like just too much, because like he can at least go to doctors and like, he's at least doing this thing, and there's not really like he's only somehow, I guess, surreally getting almost like more and more money and like unlimited money to kind of pursue that like never ending like MacArthur Genius Grant type theater play. But yeah, it's real rough watch.
Yeah,
real rough system for us.
It's even though it's like that movie is surreal. Synecdoche, New York is not. It's rooted in reality, but it is very trance-like and dreamlike. And when I say dreamlike, I don't mean like fantastical, unicorns and the way like of a fantasy dream, but like dreamlike in the sense that like things are familiar and they're not. There's an uncanny valley of it all.
It's truthful. It's truthful as opposed to being real.
Exactly, exactly. And with the dreamlike like kind of state that movie exists in, it feels like you know, the way that time passes, for example, you know, the way that, you know, in that opening scene, 5 days, 6 days, a month pass, in a scene that feels like 5 minutes, you know, that opening breakfast scene. You'll hear on the radio, it's October 1st. He'll pick up the newspaper, and it's 6 days later. Then he'll be like, oh, look at the milk. It says the milk is spoiled, and the milk is, he'll look at the date of the milk, and it's a week after that. That scene is treated like, you know, one day. But it's still, it goes over, you know, over a week or months. And that's kind of what I mean by it's this, you know, surreal, dreamlike feeling where you're kind of in reality, but you're kind of not. And you see it in those hospital scenes too, that, like, as you said, they kind of get grimier and grimier. The hospitals get worse and worse as the film goes on. And it's like, it still feels real, even if it's, you know, this surrealist representation of, like, you know, what medical care feels like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I thought both movies did such a good job of, just going surreal when they needed to be, and just going dreamy like that. I think, you know, the one thing I remember, and I don't know if I remember like the exact quote, but I think, like, you know, just the scene, I think he's in one of the doctor's office and he's just reading the magazine about, like, his ex-wife and their kid. And I want to say there's a point, I should have sworn I didn't see it this time, but I could have remember, like, I thought he had, like, opened the magazine at some point where it says, like, you know, you don't know if the magazine article is real or not, but it says, like, you know, world's greatest artist, referring to his ex-wife. It's like, world's greatest artist, like, happy to be divorced from her fat loser husband or something like that. Just like internal, like, some, like, arbitrarily, like mean thing that he's sort of internalizing about how, like, other people are talking about him. And yeah, just thought that was really good in sort of both things. They both just, like, I don't know, just like the experience of reading that is just like almost like imagining the things that people are going to say to you. It is more of a real experience than, like, if it was a realistic, like, written Time magazine article about, like, his ex-wife doing really well and she's a hot new artist in Berlin or, like, whatever else. It's like, no, it's like, you know, she's good, her ex-husband's terrible. Like, the guy reading this, you are terrible ex-husband. Like, that's how you sort of process it, right? It's more truthful than real, right?
And the way that you know, say that too about how he kind of, like, how he views the world, like, you know, there's a scene where he's reading the book and the book starts talking to him, you know, like, he's like speaking to him directly. Like, the words in the book are speaking to him directly. It kind of blurs where our perspective is as an audience, and, you know, where Caden's perspective starts, which I think is a really interesting way to view, especially Synecdoche, New York, being that the film is about a play, and gets very meta. You know, the more that they try to make the play real, and then the play becomes the movie itself. You know, the play the setting of the play, that lot becomes the setting of the film. And in the way that, you know, the surreal aspects of it all kind of increase, and it gets less and less real throughout the film. You know, the beginning of the film feels a lot more rooted in reality, you know, than the ending. And I felt the same way about All That Jazz. You know, you have these scenes where he's talking to this angelic figure, you know, the woman in white with the veil, which I found to be so beautiful, all the imagery, like, associated with that.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure
his conceptualization of, like, God and the afterlife and all that is like a beautiful woman that's very interested in him.
The way that it's peppered in too. In the beginning, it feels like part of, you know, everything. It feels like that he's just, you know, on another set. And as the film goes on, and, you know, she becomes more and more ethereal, and those scenes become more and more ethereal, and kind of breaking reality and breaking the fourth wall. And reality starts to shift. Especially too, there's, I think, a very definitive point, you know, when she lifts her veil. Nothing, you don't see anything happen to Gideon, but she lifts her veil, and then all of a sudden he's in the hospital. There is kind of this shift in the film where, like, that last third after that is especially surreal. And similarly, there's a point in Synecdoche, New York. A lot of people kind of view this as a pivotal point, where Caden jumps goes to jump off of a roof and a lifeguard saves him. Like, and a lifeguard, which again, he's not at a beach, a lifeguard comes out of nowhere and saves him from jumping off of this roof. A lot of people view it as he actually did jump off of this roof and die here, and the rest of the film is him in purgatory. I don't necessarily, go along with that, but it's a very popular theory and a very popular read of this film. Especially because when Sammy recreates that scene when they're going through his life later, and Sammy, the guy who's playing Caden, goes to recreate that scene. Sammy does
played
jump.
by the excellent Tom Noonan, right?
Tom Noonan, who is in a lot of other Charlie Kaufman films. He's a very big role in Anomalisa, if you're familiar with that movie.
I haven't. It's I'm wearing my. If I can.
It's a weird one.
Eternal Sunshine.
Oh, there you go.
I think I've seen Eternal Sunshine adaptation being John Malkovich, I think by him, but I need to see Anomalisa and that other one he did a couple years ago, which I haven't yet.
Anomalisa is an absolute trip, but Tom Noonan's character.
My brother loves Tom Noonan. Big theater guy.
Sammy is incredible.
He says what happened was is really good.
Everything that he's in.
He's
is
also
amazing.
My favorite movie with him is just the Arnold movie, Last Action Hero, where he actually just plays like this weird. It's a great art. If you like, actually, kind of thematic with this movie, because it's another fourth wall breaking. John McTiernan. I don't know if you ever seen Last Action Hero, but
the Arnold movie,
yeah, it's another good one. But you were saying Tom Noonan, like, so he does jump off the thing, right?
He does jump, and when they recreate that scene as they're going through Caden's life, Sammy does jump and kill himself there, and Caden's yelling, "I didn't jump," but Sammy's been the most accurate representation of Caden the whole film, saying things that, like, even to Hazel, that Caden never said but has felt and wishes he could say. Sammy is kind of this omniscient sort of view of Caden, which Sammy, it's interesting to unpack in and of itself. But Sammy does jump there, and so people kind of read it as this point in the film where Caden kind of, he does kill himself and he's in purgatory for the rest of it. And that's something that I want to just mention in general with talking about this film, is that, like, there is no one way to view it. There's absolutely no one correct way. And Charlie Kaufman even says this. He makes it very, very clear in an interview that he does not want to sit there and pontificate on this means this or this means that, because that absolutely takes away the experience of the viewer, of what we were kind of talking about earlier, of having an experience with this art for yourself and getting something out of it that's personal to you. In your case of, like, you had a little hinge experience go south, and those aspects of the film are going to speak to you a lot more. If you're watching this film fresh off of grief, if someone very close to you just recently passed away, all of the scenes about death and dying, and all of the monologues about death and dying, especially that one delivered by the funeral director towards the end, about how we're just waiting for something that never comes, and then we just fucking die. Like, those are going to hit you a lot harder. And if you sit there and are told this movie is going to mean this, it kind of strips that from you. So, it's.
I'm sure it's going to be a really hard watch if hopefully when I ever have kids, just because all the guilt themes about, like, him not being there for his kid or not having a relationship, and then having to watch him die, and then even at the end, like her like completely almost, like, I guess, like, kind of disagreeing or being like, no, I tried, like, I couldn't find you or this or that, and he's like, but she's like, I need you to ask me to forgive you, and then she's just like, I can't forgive you. It's like, that's just like
absolutely
brutal,
and as someone who doesn't have kids, that scene doesn't, it's not going to hit me as hard as someone who, like, has a child that, like, can feel that regret of, like, I don't, has that constant every day of, like, I don't want to mess up this child, I don't want to mess up being a parent. That storyline's gonna hit them a lot harder, and that's just the genuine beauty, especially too, of this film. Like, the first time you watch this film, you might not have kids, and then you might watch this film later and have kids and have a completely different experience with it. And it's just, again, why I picked this movie is because throughout my life, every time I've seen it, I've got something completely different out of it. The first time I watched this movie, I was 16, and I was a bushy-eyed little high school student, kind of starting to experience the world a little bit. And, hit with a sense of reality. And now that I'm, a little bit older and I have lived a little bit more life, when I watch this movie, the reality sets in, I think, a lot harder than it did, watching this movie when I was younger and first kind of having those ideas, plopped into my head.
Yeah.
It's just, it's the truthfully, like, the most beautiful thing about this film. And again, the reason that I picked it. And I'm sure all that jazz, I'm going to have a completely different experience with it when I revisit it later as well. Just as an artist, watching somebody get lost in their art, the more that I feel like I've gotten, not that I feel like I get lost in mine, but I've definitely had experiences, especially with writing Hot Lettuce, where, I get so caught up in the creation of the art that the art doesn't get created. I worked on Hot Lettuce, that's a pivot, but I put out an album last year as Hot Lettuce, and that album took me years to write. I set it down multiple times. I gave up on it a couple of times, thinking that it was just, comparing it to other things, comparing myself to other artists, and, my own life getting in the way, COVID getting in the way, and, the anxiety that I was, going through at the time of that, or, working a job that was kind of rough and just having that take over my life, the ways in which my life would get in the way of my art, or my emotions would get in the way of my art. And that album, very well could have never come out as a result. It is something that I really feel while watching both of these movies. The more that I kind of grow in my art, watching an artist struggle with creating it, as someone who's just tries my best every single day to be pushing myself as a creative individual and be pushing myself as an artist. I really found so much to relate to in the struggle of both of these things. So it was really special to watch them both, I think, comparing them to each other, seeing kind of both sides.
Yeah, the scene, like, I remember, like, where he says, like, where he's starting, like, the big, after he gets the MacArthur grant, and he's in Synecdoche, and he's starting the big thing, and he's like, he gets the actors together, and he says something like, all right, we're gonna just have honest conversations, and through it like a piece of theater will emerge. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is gonna take 1,000 years, right? Like, it's not, just like, I can tell that sort of thing of, like, he just wants to get to the absolute sort of, like, pure truth of the thing. And it's always the temptation to do that, and then just, constantly work on it, never get it done, and then just get even more and more meta. You said something.
Hmm?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like he says, like one of the actors says at a certain point, like, when are we gonna get an audience in here? It's been 17 years, and he's still, and he ignores that comment completely, and is just
Absolutely.
like, no, we're gonna dive further into my lonely, fucked up being, like, just dive and completely ignoring the comment that he made, that we've been sitting here and doing this for 17 years. So, absolutely just getting caught up in the process of wanting it to be the best it can be, and then it never happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, so one question I've asked in the last two casts, I think it's probably gonna be a regular one, would be, so you said you were 16 watching this. How old are you now?
I'm 26 now.
34. 26. Okay. So you were 16. Was this like the first movie that you sort of, like, that really got you, like, as like a teen, or like as an adult, or like, was this like one of the first thing, like, I guess, was it this, or was it something else where you remember, like, oh shit, this is like,
no, it was this
really connected?
It was this 100%. I enjoy watching movies. I'm not as hardcore as a lot of other people who, like, make film of their life, but I absolutely, like, I have the movies in my life that I love, and that means something to me. But this was the first film that I saw that, like, truly affected me to my core, like, changed my perspective on existence, and, like, made me think about, life and myself in completely different ways. Like, the introspection of it all, but also just, like, to shake me to my core in the way that this film did. I had never experienced something like that prior. And honestly, since, like, I've seen movies that, like, that I sit with, and I'm like, wow, that was incredible, or like, wow, I was genuinely moved by this. But the way in which Synecdoche, New York, I think, because I relate so deeply to Caden, the way that movie just feels like a mirror into the things that I don't like to think about, and the thing is, it just, in a way that it speaks to me. I feel that way more than I ever have to this day, and so that's truly why I picked, and why I still will go back to this movie, a decade later, and get something new out of it every single time. It's just it's such a special experience.
Yeah, my third note was just that's just me up on there on screen, and it was just like that was like literally I was like, oh okay, yeah, I was like, yeah, it's what I remember. This is just me, and so it was, then just a fun 2 hours. Even the old people, his parents. I don't know how your parents are. My parents are kind of like Frank and Estelle from Seinfeld a little bit. Little like George's parents. So like even his parents, which I think is played one of the dad. I can't remember the mom, but the dad is played by the guy Hesh from The Sopranos. But it's like they're coming out of the theater and they're just like even, not that my parents have done this, not that they both like are. My dad's a big movie lover, my mom as well, and but like just even like them, like the way they were arguing coming out of it, just like George's parents on Seinfeld, like he's like he says something like why were they so young, like this is Death of a Salesman or something. It's like I don't get why it's just like very much, and they're just kind of arguing about anything and everything. I was just like, man, it shouldn't have that too. Like just give me the health anxiety that's me, and give me just the guy sort of dealing with anxiety about producing something versus commercial or like whatever else, but don't also give me all these like really minor things. Even the thing, like another note, like when his therapist asks, he says he's talking about someone killing themselves, and the way he hears it is, why did you kill yourself? And then he just like he's like, and then she's like, why did he kill himself? And he can't tell if like he heard that or not. The amount of times that's happened where even like I'm sure if I had recordings of what people said to me where I could swear up and down that I heard something different and process it differently, where it was just like I thought it was like just something about me, something that I thought I think is that I heard about me that I didn't want to hear about me. It's just like an anxiety driven sort of like audio oral experience, like.
But that's huge. It's huge that you bring that up, though, because that's very prominent in Synecdoche, New York. When I was mentioning every single scene when he's talking to a doctor, and he's like, I'm going to recommend you go see a neurologist. A urologist? No, a neurologist, a brain doctor. And he's like, I thought you said urologist. Like, the communication there, I think it's really interesting that you kind of bring up like the auditory, I totally heard something different. Especially in that scene where she's describing Little Winky, that just absolutely horrific book, and then he's like, "Yeah, he killed himself when he was 5." That scene is ridiculous in and of itself. That whole monologue, where she's talking about that book is wild. But another one where she said it was because I brought up the whole theory that Caden did kill himself in the film. That part is another thing that people point to where they're like. She says, "Why did you kill yourself?" He says, "Why would he kill himself?" And she says, "Why did you?" And he's like, "Huh?" And she's like, "Why would you?" Exactly that scene. The communication, but also like, him hearing the bit about death because he's always thinking about death. There's another thing too that I want to bring up in the beginning. He is reading a newspaper. And he says, "Oh, this guy died. Wait, he won the Nobel Prize." Showing where his mind is at. It's his mind is kind of always circling that. And there's always someone, a newspaper article talking about it. He's always talking about someone dying. Similarly, in all that jazz, there's the bit in the stand-up, the film that he's kind of editing, where he's talking about death. He's talking about the stages of grief. He's, that whole stand-up bit is about death, and that comes up so many times. So that same bit is played because, they're re-editing and, watching the stand-up. That comes up so many times. And this cyclical, bit of like, it always comes back to that, I think is really prominent in both films. It's always prevalent, whether Caden or Gideon are aware of it and are, being cognizant of it. It's always kind of in the background of the film. That's always kind of imminent. And, as we know, both films end with the main character dying. Like they die and it ends.
Yeah.
And so the fact that that's kind of basically foreshadowed throughout the whole film in both films, it is really interesting the way that it's worked in. and it's there the whole time.
Yeah, and I thought the anxieties about death are like they come out in slightly like similar ways, slightly different expressions of it. Like another note I put was he went in, and again this is literally this is another one where I was like, this is just fucking me again, because like he went in, so it's like he went in, it's like he's talking about some other guy that died. I think it might have been his father. I think it was his father. He went in because his finger hurt. He suffered horribly. He called out to me before he died. It was in the longest and saddest deathbed speech ever. It turns out he regretted his life. He just says the worst thing, like all the fears that you could have about dying, about like, oh yeah, you went in because it's like nothing, because it was just your finger hurting, and then you're calling out to your children, and it's you give a long and sad deathbed, and you regret your whole life, and you know all that stuff. It's like that's how he processes the dad's death, and yeah, I mean the finger thing also. I have like a baseball injury just from 16 years. Yeah, I have like a gooseneck deformity on one of my fingers.
Oh my goodness!
Shout out all the video content people. Yeah, that was a couple years ago. I was like, got it looked at, and the guy's like, yeah, you're just gonna have to live with that. There's like not much we can really do there. I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is just till I die now, and I've had it since I was like 16.
No, I know how that goes.
But yeah, I was just wondering, it'd be like, like just me going in there and just being like, oh yeah. Then that led to like, it turns out he was suffering horribly and died. But I thought it was interesting and all that jazz that like, I thought the similarity. This is where he like had, I thought, like a fair amount of similarity in like the when he went into the hospital the first time. The John Lithgow character is like sort of he's kind of like a rival, like other theater director, and it shows him as Gideon goes into the hospital, like it shows his producers like basically going to his rival theater producer and being like, hey, can you do this play? And like it's like this other guy's going to take over his work, and like this and that and the other thing. And yeah, it's like it's also just like, yeah, just I thought the writing on those was both really good, I guess. On just doing like just the different types of but it's like a similar anxiety, but it's just different anxieties, you know, of like almost the same thing.
It's similarly, it's like I kind of mentioned earlier, like it's the same anxiety, and it's the same sort of, it comes from the same place of perfectionism, but like I've kind of said, Caden and Gideon deal with it in completely different ways. Yeah, you know, Gideon throwing caution to the wind and just doing what he wants, and Caden, you know, being so caught
hard for me to relate to that, you know.
Yeah, it's a little bit harder for me to relate to throwing caution to the wind as someone who's so extremely anxious about every, you know, little bit of aspect of everything. But it's the opposite way of dealing with it, you know. It's the same sort of it's the same feeling, like I said. But some people deal with it by ignoring it, and some people deal with it by obsessing over it. You know, back to the medical things. Adele coughing in the beginning of the film and having that be what inevitably kills her, and you kind of see that's her attitude towards things. Olive, in the beginning, his daughter Olive, her poop is green, and she's like, "Why is my poop green? Oh my god!" And Olive's like, "You're fine." Adele's like, "You probably just ate something green. I don't know. You're fine." You know, she just kind of lets those sorts of things, you know, roll off her back, and you know, go on to the next thing. Whereas I'm sure if the roles were reversed and it was Caden, he'd, you know, start to be like, oh, maybe it's, you know, this, that, or the other thing. He
does, and he actually has a serious one when he has he has like really black parts in his stool, which, like, you know, not to, for all the viewers out there, just FYI, if you have like very extremely black parts in your stool, that's a sign of like internal bleeding, and is like hospital immediately, right? But his wife doesn't even roll over. She's like, it's probably nothing. It's the same.
Exactly. And then the interesting thing too is like I had also like read that scene too, is like that it wasn't all that dark. I mean, I guess we're sitting here and talking about the, you know, the color of it, but I kind of read that scene as there was actually nothing wrong, and he was searching for it, because he was sitting there like digging through it, like looking for something wrong. And the way that I kind of, which again, there's no right way to read these things, but I kind of read that scene as him looking for something wrong. You know, him being so obsessed with there being something wrong with him that he's starting to look for it, which is something that I relate to.
Could be a theme of, yeah, it could be I mean, that would make sense. I'll have to go out. I'm ripping it at the moment, so I'll try and go back and like a high quality version of it. I'll try and go back and see about that, because like he does do that, to your point, in other like the thing with the his therapist, I think the marriage counselor's foot, like it just seems to be getting worse and worse in a way that no one talks about or notices. But like she has like one sort of bloated, very unhealthy looking foot, and I was curious like how much like is that. I mean, you never know what's reality and what's not in his thing. Like, is that reality, or is he sort of transposing like his own health anxiety on like these other people and these other things now as well? So absolutely could have been doing that with his own stool.
And
so
the idea that he's so obsessed with something being wrong with him that he's looking for it. As someone with health anxiety, I definitely am guilty of like a little twinge happening or a little something happening, and then I'm starting to like look for everything being wrong. I fall down rabbit holes of, this is going on with me, so therefore this, and this, and I start to feel it. I've gone to a doctor feeling symptoms that weren't there. The brain is quite strong and can...
It's psychosomatic, right? I mean, that's all the...
Yeah, I mean, placebo effects are real, psychosomatic things are real, and it starts to become, can I trust my own body? I have so much fear of maybe this time something's actually going to be wrong. I know that like I was wrong before. I know that all the other times I was fine, but like this is the time, this is the time that something's actually wrong with me. Or, because everyone in my life is so used to me having a breakdown over a perceived medical issue that, down the line, they're not going to take me as seriously. Because they're just going to chalk it up to my anxiety when, this is actually something wrong. And that makes me spiral even harder. So those aspects of being someone with, medical anxiety like that, when you're in your own body and you're like, you feel trapped in that, there's so many points where Caden doesn't even know what's going on. He just says, I'm sick. It's such an interesting window into that. And it's also interesting that this is not a minor part of the movie, but it's not the main point of this movie. We're sitting here and talking a lot about the medical bits of this film, but like it's a small portion compared to everything else that's going on.
Maybe it depends on your experience with it.
But
right?
it depends.
I mean, to your point about you can taking different things from the movies, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, just like it was interesting. So I was sitting with. So I will say it's a very like even because I deal with a lot of this stuff, most of this stuff by laughing, right? And that's like it's like the shout out me. I did my whole college thesis on like theories of humor and like stuff of that, and like was just like the laughter as like a way to sort of like disarm something and like make something less threatening. I did kind of wonder how much of that was like Charlie Kaufman almost probably. I wonder how much he has health anxiety. I would imagine quite a bit based on the movie. Seems pretty autobiographical. But he like, I was watching it with a friend, and my friend doesn't have health anxiety. So it was interesting. Like, I laugh at myself with all this stuff. And so we were just like, Synecdoche was just a really funny movie from that. Like, it's horrifying from the health anxiety, but also like, it's just so funny. And he was enjoying the hell out of it because we've been friends for forever, and he knows about my health anxiety. So, but it was interesting to your point about, taking different things. Like he has, he's much more sensitive to like textures and sounds, and stuff. And like, this is like a crazy texture movie. Like a lot of the sound design, talking about sound design and like when, Gideon was having the panic attack and all that jazz. But in Synecdoche, the sound design on it is like, and all the textures and everything, like, production design is so crazy good on that. And so I was correspondingly laughing at him every time there was just some kind of like fucked up weird like sensory overload issue on like either like something being like way louder than normal, or even like what we were talking about with like his therapist saying like, why did you kill yourself, why did he like that thing. And then it got both of us, we were both laughing at like he can just kind of hear, I love these little throwaway things, but like earlier in the movie, it talks about like arthritis, him having arthritis and going on medication for it or something, or he's feeling arthritic. But then like you just hear a radio thing of like, it's like they're finding chromosomal damage, like just like some like insane body horror type, like there's chromosomal damage from the use of arthritis medication that they're finding now. And it's like, it's not even like called out, it's just in the background, but we're both like, we're just dying laughing at that, of just how funny that was. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's so even like those bits like the little animations on the TV that is playing in his
In him,
like, and he's the one in the animations on the TV
and
screen.
Tom Noonan too. He's behind that tree in the one of them.
Tom
Which my
Noonan
buddy called out.
is if you watch that movie, Sammy is that's a really big thing to talk about. But Sammy is in so many scenes.
Yeah,
When
I didn't notice it that much the first time, but this time I definitely did. I was like, "Oh, that's fucking Tom Noonan," and then he was just there all
it's
the,
like
all
the
the time.
whole film, and there's a really interesting point too where this isn't this is only in the script, but there are dates of like when the movie takes place like listed in the script. And when Sammy is getting cast in the play, and he meets Caden for the first time, and he tells Caden, "I've been watching you for 20 years." That scene technically takes place in 2025, and the first scene where you first see Sammy takes place in 2005. So not only did Sammy start watching Caden when we started watching Caden, which is a very interesting point. It's throughout the whole film that you start to that you see him, and you don't notice that the first time that you watch this. But when I watched it for the first time, my best friend who showed this to me because it's his favorite movie as well. He was like, pay attention to the background because you might see someone popping up, and pay attention to the passage of time. So that's why when I mention, that opening breakfast scene where a month passes in the span of 5 minutes, because, the cyclicalness of morning routine and kind of illustrating how, our brain starts to kind of go on autopilot with routine, and days kind of blend together in the way that that's kind of illustrated there. The way that the passage of time and those subtle things that like you said, you don't necessarily see Sammy the first time that you watch it, or you don't necessarily, notice that in that opening scene, a month has gone by. It's those very little things that, again, the more you watch this movie will stick out to you. And it's so beautiful to me that this one piece of art that, like Charlie Kaufman said, it's fixed, it's edited, it's the same thing every single time you watch it, changes so much every single time. I've had that experience with records as well, where I'll listen to an album and it speaks to me in a completely different way than it did the first time I heard it. And that is just something, when you get to talking about art and being an artist, like that I strive for so hard, is to create something that like not only speaks to people, but like people get different things out of it and can return to something and continually get different things out of it. Like that is the true testament of a piece of art, in my opinion. The way that which the audience interacts with it, and allowing for that audience interaction too, I think is really important. Giving space for an audience to interact with your art, be it a film, be it a YouTube video, be it an album, giving your audience the space to experience that for themselves. It is a really beautiful part of creating.
Yeah. It really, like, I was really like happy. I was had trepidation because I knew what it was about watching it again, and also I just knew how the week was going, so I was like, fuck. It's just bad timing. But like, it honestly, it ended up like, as I feel like extraordinarily happy. I was actually just like bragging at my therapy on Friday. Shout out therapy. Shout out my therapist, who's great. And it was just like saying like like I went through like a whole roller coaster of emotions due to like just the Hinge thing and sort of watching it, like just watching all these movies. And but it ended up like just really the themes in it of like connecting just ended up connecting, and like what it pulled out. Yeah, it is like beautiful. It sort of like sunk me into like this like very deep place. And I was like, okay, well, now I got to confront a lot of this stuff.
But it's what you
because
need.
Like I was thinking, yeah, because like one of the last like really couple months ago, like I had a really good Hinge experience, and that one experience, like I don't want to call it a relationship, but like whatever, like that one kind of ended because she didn't want to hear me talk about movies, and which is like fair point. It can be like I have 1981 movies I think now. It can be a lot, and I watch a lot of movies, and so it's just like, but also it was like it was a big step for me because it was like I like wasn't too as upset with that one as I probably would have been in the past, because it's like, well, if they don't want to hear me talk about movies, then that's probably not going to be a good like it's probably just not going to work, because like I just can't stop. And so it caused me. I was like, I had to like confront it, and then it was like it caused me to be like, well, I should do probably something else. Because on the other hand, I was like, that is also probably a lot to ask of someone. Of just like, I think that's like not. I'm not criticizing Caden or whatever. But like he is asking, like, he is sort of like, he's both like very understandably needy, but also he's kind of relentlessly needy. I think in a way that he doesn't necessarily, like, of all his talk about honesty, I think there's also the anxiety of like, is he actually like investigating like why he's so needy, and like, is it just a base thing of like he doesn't feel loved and he wants to feel loved, which is like, that's all of us. But like, I kind of wonder, like, I don't know, I really, the similarities I saw with me is just like, yeah, I should start like a podcast, I should start like a TikTok channel or something, because like that is going to be a lot to ask of like, of anybody to just be like, hey, yeah, it's like I want to express my thoughts and talk with people and like do whatever about movies. And, that's like, yeah. So it's like, I don't know, I guess I was just really thankful to like this as well, because like kind of a similar thing happened of just like, man, am I like kind of overly looking for someone to like, put my head on their shoulder? Like, am I just being Caden like right now? Am I doing that? Is like, is this going to be like, is that just going to be me? Like, and yeah, I don't know. It's sort of like exercise for the brain, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at
in the heart,
right? Because you're in that position. Then you look at Caden and Adele's relationship, for example. Theater's the most important thing to him. It's his life, it's his art, and Adele couldn't be bothered to show up to the opening night of Death of a Salesman. When he tries to talk about the play that he's working on. She just kind of like, oh, you'll figure it out. Like there's no interaction there. She's not invested at all. And it's like, why is he so obsessed with Adele, when she doesn't reciprocate that at all? And it's like,
yeah.
And it's interesting to, to see he's still trying so hard even after she leaves him and is just in Berlin indefinitely. There's the scene when he's with Hazel and he's like, I can't do this with you, on their first date, I can't have sex with you. I can't pursue this with you because I have a wife. And Hazel's like, she's been in Berlin for a year. And he's like, she's only been gone, a few weeks. He's like, she hasn't called you in a year. And, and it's like, I've seen this in so many of my, my friends and myself in past relationships where it's like, why am I pining over someone that doesn't care? Why am I investing so much into someone that's not a match for me? Yeah. And it's
with Hazel, it's hard because it's like I feel like he thinks she's kind of like a little bit stupid and like a little bit like not sophisticated like Adele. But I wasn't sure to what extent like that was because she was interested in him, because eventually it does end up like, they do end up like going back or whatever. But there's always the thing of like, it feels like in his demeanor that like he almost thinks like, well, she's not on my level. Like he almost just doesn't want to date her because like he has this idea of like he needs like this sort of like really like artistic, like smart, like talented, like he wants to be loved by a particular type of woman, not any woman, but just like this thing,
It's almost interesting.
Do you think it was like,
go on?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's almost interesting to compare Caden's relationship with Hazel to Gideon's relationship with Katie, his kind of girlfriend. They say in the movie that he this angel says that he has like a different set of rules for Katie. He kind of tells Katie, I sleep around, but I come home to you. This set of ideals that he has around Katie. I mean, she's, he sleeps with a million women, but she's the only one that pops up in his fantasies, and she's the one at home. In that final musical number where it's his ex-wife and his daughter, the other person who has a section, a number is Katie. And I think it's kind of like interesting to compare his ideals around Katie, that she's better than the other woman, but yet he doesn't want to commit to marrying her, because of whatever internal struggles he's having in with himself, whatever opinions he has of himself. Gideon can't commit because he's, too committed to this, that, or the art, or, he just doesn't want to settle down with someone and wants to continue philandering, whatever the case may be. And you see the direct consequences of both of these kinds of hesitation, in which Caden doesn't have Hazel, and Hazel ends up living her own life with Derek, and Caden kind of has to sit on the sidelines. And the consequences of Gideon with Katie, kind of on the flip side, where Gideon goes to the hospital, and when he first goes to the hospital, and Katie's calling, and she's like, well, I'm not technically his family, and they hang up on her. The consequences of her, not being able to be there, even though she was like the first to call and the first to try to be by his side. You kind of see the consequences of the relationship could be there if both parties were willing and ready, but not both parties aren't necessarily putting in what they need to into the relationship, and something that could be a great relationship doesn't necessarily pan out for one reason or another. And that's another harsh reality is these people could be a good pairing, but because of the place that they're at in life, it doesn't work out, even if on paper or theoretically it would work out. A harsh reality of missed timing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought that all that jazz was a lot more like self-critical. I mean, to the extent obviously Fosse, and you never know how much is like purely autobiographical versus like fears versus just like what I fear I myself am going to be in almost like a more exaggerated version of myself going through this thing. I thought like the Fosse, like they have that it's almost like a very touching scene in the hospital when she Gideon is like asking his, the girlfriend, he's like, I called you, where were you? And she's like, and he's like, you were out with someone. She's like, yeah, I was sleeping with a guy. Mm-hmm. And then, he says like, he has like this thing, he says, because I really do love you. And then like, there's not even like 2 seconds before it cuts to him in his sort of like ethereal world where he's like, I was just saying that. Like, I don't know if like, I think the lady, like, did you really mean that? He's like, I
just wanted to say something nice.
I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe. Well, he wanted to get back at her too. He wanted to like, he was like, he was like, I wanted to say something nice. And I think he also says, I kind of wanted to say something mean as well. Which is just like, if that's Fosse talking about himself, that's like very critical, super, super critical. And I think like the Caden one, I think is like it felt a bit more almost implicit. Not that he has like self pity for himself, but it's not, I think like Caden just does seem like a much more almost oblivious about like what participation, what sort of like what responsibility or like participation he has in women, like kind of just being like, geez, I don't know if I can do this.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when he marries Claire. There's a bit where he has a relationship with Claire, who's the actress playing Hazel.
Played by Michelle Williams, I think, right?
Yes.
I think.
Yes, that makes sense.
Heath Ledger's former partner.
Yes.
That's not her only. I realize that. I'm not trying to be sexist by saying that. She's also a great actress in her own right.
No, absolutely. Yes.
I do like. I do like Heath Ledger. She was great. Manchester by the Sea. Just to shout out Michelle Williams here. I'm not saying, oh yeah.
Yeah. You gotta give her flowers too. Yeah, exactly. She's not just Heath Ledger's former partner.
She's a great actress. My favorite thing with her is for sure Manchester by the Sea. I think she's super, super good in that. Also, interestingly, I didn't know this. I'm just pulled up her Wikipedia. She apparently played, and there's a miniseries I haven't watched called Fosse Verdon. I don't know so apologies for all that. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So, his wife in the movie, his ex-wife or whatever, that was based on his real relationship with the lady Gwen. I think it's Verdon, or maybe it's Verdone. I don't know. But, it's self-autobiographical. Apparently Michelle Williams played her in the miniseries in 2019. So that's a weird connection between the two, I guess. Is that Sam Rockwell plays Bob Fosse. Michelle Williams plays, I guess, the character who would be his ex-wife in the movie, but the real-life version of her. So that's neat. But yeah, shout out Michelle Williams. I think it was speak for the official pod. We're fans, so.
Absolutely. Shout out Michelle Williams. The reason why we bring it up, though, or why I brought it up, was because you're kind of talking about how he is a little bit oblivious to how he treats these women in his relationship with them, and I think it's very prominent in the scene where he finds out that Olive is like a 10-year-old who's been tattooed a bunch, Which again, I don't, you don't know what's real or not in this film, but he like reads this article that like Olive is this like 10-year-old tattoo protege, and he's just like freaking out, like, she's tattooed, I have to go find my daughter. And Claire's like, what do you mean? Your daughter's right here. Like, he has a family with Claire, he has a daughter, and yet all he's thinking about is his quote unquote real family. Like, he's still, it's almost like they're a stand-in for, you know, what he's lacking by, you know, funny, Adele Lack, you know, her last name is Lack in the film. You know, it's not super.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, Adele's last name is Lack. She goes, so, oh no, you know.
That's like, what's his face in Interstellar, Matt Damon's character being named Man, and like a criticism of like mankind and, you know, men.
Oh no. So subtle.
You know what? The line I loved about that was a note I wrote when he said, like, he's talking about his, well, two things about that. One is like, that's such a good point about like, yeah, they're like stand-ins. But he says, like, when he's like ranting at some point later in the movie, he says, I miss Olive, you know, I miss this, I miss Olive and my other one. You know, he didn't even remember his other, like the daughter he had with Michelle Williams. He doesn't even remember her name. He's just like, I miss Olive and my other one. You know, like whatever happened to that kid, she just kind of off screen at a certain point.
The whole family, like, you know, it almost like comes out of nowhere. Like all of a sudden he and Claire have a kid, like, and there's just like that whole relationship is so glossed over. It's almost kind of like Hayden himself is like barely paying attention to it. The way that it's so kind of glossed over in the film. And even to the point where he's like, oh, I have to leave. Olive is getting tattooed. And Michelle Williams goes, everyone's tattooed. And she pulls up her shirt, and she's got this massive back piece. And he's like, I've never even seen that before. You know, like, and you can read that literally as like, she has a massive back tattoo that takes up her whole back that he's literally never seen. Like, you can very much read that literally. Because like, I'm sure like it's entirely possible that he pays so little attention that he wouldn't notice that. And
his delivery on that's so fucking good. In general, I think this is probably his best movie, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like, I'm trying to think of something else that would. I mean, I really love him in Punch Drunk Love. To the point about the question about first, I watched that movie when I was 13. That was like my first like. I'd watched Boogie. I'm probably gonna tell this story like almost every podcast. Boogie Nights was the first one, and then I was like, oh, what else has he done? Because that P.T. Anderson. And I watched Punch Drunk Love. I was like, this is my favorite movie now. Yeah, so Philip Seymour Hoffman, his delivery on some of this stuff is tremendous.
Oh, this is absolutely.
What were you saying? Sorry.
I think with Philip Seymour Hoffman, you know, kind of saying that too with the delivery and everything. There's a scene in the beginning where he is doing Death of a Salesman. He's giving notes to the actors, and he kind of gives one of them because you know we mentioned it earlier, but in his version of Death of the Salesman, he chose to cast younger actors, which is typically in Death of a Salesman they are supposed to be older. And that was an intentional, you know, point made by him. And so when he's talking to this young actor, giving him some points, he kind of says, you know, the real tragedy here is that you, the young actor, are inevitable. You know, you're talking about meeting your death and getting older and all this, you know, and the tragedy here is that you, the young actor, will eventually meet that same fate. And it gets kind of meta in that way. And in that same way, Philip Seymour Hoffman isn't around anymore. You know, the tragedy of, you know, he too is, you know, out there trying to make art and is again going to inevitably meet the same fate. And he's, and it all comes, you know, to that same ending. And it's really haunting hearing him talk about like that sort of inevitability, watching the film, knowing that he isn't alive anymore. Yeah. It's really eerie.
Tragic loss. Probably like, you know, I remember, I think Jack Nicholson said when Marlon Brando died, he was just talking about actors. He's like, well, everybody gets to move up one because it's like, you know, he was number one. So everyone, every other, whatever other order you have actors in, it's like, just not disputing that Brando's one. Hoffman might have been up at the top in terms of, for American actors at least, I think. Yeah, just when he is, so it sucks so much that he's not getting to make movies anymore. And they're all, I mean, that sounds probably way callous. Like it sucks that it sucks that he died in general, but also, you know, yeah, to the point like he had so much more to give, and he's so titanically good in this that yeah, I really miss him. It's
truly like the reason why I think, you know, there's a million reasons why this film is so good, but the the performance by Philip Seymour Hoffman to give such an honest and relatable and just painful performance, you know, it really comes down to how it's acted. You know, him and, you know, Adele being, you know, the character that she is, where she is just so beyond callous, and, you know, this...
Shout out Catherine Keener. She's great in this. Yeah.
And you know, and Hazel as well being, you know, this kind of bubbly, like almost oblivious to the role that she plays in Caden's life. And, you know, Tom Noonan just being Tom Noonan and like being kind of sneaking around, sliding around, being this omniscient sort of like view of everything, and the way that he has his demeanor the whole film. This almost like he's like sad the whole time. Like it's such a beautifully acted movie, and I try to, you know, consider all of the parts, because, you know, when you're watching a film and interacting with it, you know, it's not just what you're seeing on. I mean, it is, but, you know, it's the individual performances, it's the score, it's the intentional choice in which every camera angle is placed. There was some very you know, trying to consider every aspect, because there was some really interesting camera work, especially in All That Jazz that I found. I found there was a lot of interesting scenes in All That Jazz where there would be kind of mid dialogue changing camera angles to these seemingly like impossible, non-traditional angles, you know, that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And kind of the way that the camera adds to like the voyeuristic aspect of that movie. Both, I think, you know, Synecdoche, New York and All That Jazz have this voyeuristic aspect of the way that the camera is placed throughout these because they are both very dialogue heavy movies, but the way that the camera kind of places you amongst that dialogue, I think, is another really key way in which it gets you invested in relating to everything, you know, because you know the camera even makes you feel like you're there.
This is a hard movie to pull off, like this type of movie. Like, you know, like this could very easily. I'm trying to think of one. I don't know if I've seen one that's sort of like, because you could rightfully say about both these movies that they're up their own ass, but like they earn it to the point about like you have Philip Seymour Hoffman and is so charismatic. Roy Scheider is so good in it. The music is so good in both movies. My buddy was like super like the score in by John Bryan, who also did, shout out John Bryan, he did Punch Drunk Love score, which is one of my favorite scores in any movie. The score is great in that. It's great in All That Jazz, all the musical numbers, the set design, the camera, the editing. Like they earn it. You know, it's like it's such an impossible. It feels like such an impossible feat that both these movies are actually good. Like, because you could just so easily, if it was like, if any like one individual piece just like sort of went off the rails, it'd be like, well, this is too pretentious, right? You could so easily delve into that, but no, they get there, and yeah, credit to everyone on them.
Yeah, you could easily say, you know, the common quote of "it insists upon itself." You know, you hear that quite a bit.
I never know what that means, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
I mean, I honestly don't feel like that means anything, but the connotation of like, you know, it being up its own ass is kind of what you know that sort of implies. But you know, because Synecdoche, New York it's a surreal and quite pretentious movie, but it earns it in its honesty, and you know, it allows for it. If you view it as pretentious, you know, maybe that's something that's kind of on your side, you know, that's on the viewer. You know, if the viewer is that's what they're getting out of it, that there might be something more to say on, you know, your perspective, you know, either on life and on the way that you viewed it. Because again, like with something like this, it is so up to interpretation. You know, you can view it as that the second half of the movie is Caden in purgatory, or you can, you know, view it as just it's an abstract representation of his decline. And I think that really is, you know, on the point that I've made a few times of the fact that this movie is so beautiful because every single time and every single person that watches it's going to get something completely different out of it. You know, that really highlights that.
Yeah, you know, it's another thing I wrote a note earlier. The another thing that gets to change topics slightly was it seemed very predictive and very relevant today of like the collapse of America. Like I totally, even in COVID, like I think I just forgot that like there's people, this is 2008 and there's people wearing masks and like society is collapsing and like he's trying to put on like this theater thing while just like, you know, eventually he goes outside and like just tons of homeless people and military tanks and like, you know, there's that big fucking Zeppelin that's just like going through, you know, wherever. And yeah, I thought it was interesting. I kind of wonder like that, you know, there's social commentary in anything, right? But like it's a very kind of sneaky social commentary. I think that's probably a bit more than All That Jazz. Like All That Jazz, I think the similarity, like they share the creator's anxiety about like needing to economically make something make sense creatively, because like there's stuff in All That Jazz about like you know, like during the middle of like the really erotic dance sequence, it's like, you know, oh, how are we gonna make money on this? And like, oh, there goes the airplane commercial.
Yeah, there goes the family
like,
audience.
There's that level. There goes the family audience. Yeah, exactly. There goes the family audience. And but yeah, I thought Synecdoche had a lot more of like the, you know, it was almost instinctual, I guess. Like, do you think that's where he thought American society was heading, and how did he know? I guess.
I mean, yeah,
kind of just knew at that point.
It's you can kind of read it as, you know, it's the inevitability of societal collapse. I mean, like, you know, this idea of like this doomsday, like we're all kind of headed there. You know, especially I think, you know, in today's day and age, you know, you turn on your phone and it's just like, all right, here's 10 new horrific things that our government is doing here in America. You know, it a lot of times feels like that's this kind of inevitability, and that's where things are going. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, you can read it as that. I tend to kind of look at that scene, you know, or the scenes towards the end where, you know, the society that they created in this play, like, you know, the film set turns into like a FEMA site, and, you know, it literally feels like there's an apocalypse happening around you. Caden doesn't realize any of it. Caden barely acknowledges it. He's like walking through, you know, at the end of the film, like there's just dead people everywhere and society has collapsed, and he doesn't acknowledge it at all. And you can kind of read that as you know, not like I'm telling you how to read it, but you know, as a representation of Caden's life truly collapsing around him. His entire life has fallen apart, yet he's still, all he can think about is this play. Like, literally, like the last line of the play is him, or the movie is him saying, "I know what I'm going to call it now." Like, still, you know, there's so many people that are dead around him. Everything is basically over. He himself is a husk of a person and is literally dying, laying on this person's shoulder. And all he can think about is, "Oh, I know what I'm going to call it now." And, you know, something that he's kind of referenced many times throughout the film is, "Oh, I think I'm going to call it this," or "I think I'm going to call it this," you know. It never reaches that. And, you know, it's interesting that he uses an apocalyptic kind of scenario to kind of illustrate that, you know, whether it be like an actual apocalypse or just kind of a visual representation of like Caden truly at this point, like, has nothing. His life has been reduced like to nothing. You know, it's you can read it either way, or you can read it completely differently. And you know, I try to approach, you know, talking about this film as, I don't want to, like, you know, pontificate on explaining this exactly means this or this exactly means this, but because I don't want to rob that experience from somebody. But, you know, there's to kind of put the seed into people's head of, like, you know, there's a lot of different ways that this can be kind of construed. And that's again what I want to encourage is, you know, someone to watch this movie. Everyone that I've told to watch this movie, you know, I try not to give them any preconceived notions, any preconceived summary. You know, I do like to mention to people to pay attention to the passage of time when they watch it, just because I think it's an interesting thing to kind of pay attention to as the movie progresses. You know, but again, just, you know, trying not to just be like, this means this and this means that, because people do want those things sort of spoon-fed to them. You know, people want to understand media, and they want to be like, "Oh, I got this." They don't want to leave it open or leave it as, you know, it could be X, Y, or Z. One of my absolute favorite video games, to bring it back to video games, is a game called Returnal. and it is a very
Love that game.
Okay, so there you go.
Yeah.
It is a very abstract story. And the developers of that game they've come out and said that they're not going to explain it. They don't want to say this means this and this means that, because again, would rob the entire experience of that from the player of gaining their own sort of perspective on it. And again, with Synecdoche New York, it gets so surreal that it could mean anything. Which is kind of a cop out, but it's also makes it so much more personal.
Yeah. I had another question I was going to ask about the because I want to come back to Returnal, because I would love to talk about Returnal
all day.
Do you think like any of the stuff related to society collapsing was like was it intended as like self-criticism at all, potentially, in a way? Because I was kind of wondering about that a little bit after watching it, of like he's talking about like we're just gonna have honest conversations, and through that a piece of theater will emerge, and he's like increasingly getting up his own ass as like society is falling down. But I don't know interestingly that he's intending it as like a thing about the responsibility of the artist to like engage with like society and do this. I think maybe, but I don't know where I guess I fall on that, of like if he's intending like juxtaposing the like increasingly like baroque and complicated nature of the play with like as society is just collapsing literally around him, and people are massing fascism and big zeppelins and everything else. Do you think he was saying anything about like the like artist's responsibility, or that he maybe should have engaged more, or criticizing, or just saying like this is just is it more about like because I'm making movies or making TikTok videos about dresses for movies in the 40s over the last couple of days. It's like, but at the same time everything in America's got just going on. So like, do you think it's in criticism, or just like this is the condition of being like an artist in America, and just setting the table?
I think it depends on how you read the quote unquote society, because when you see the society that has fallen apart, it's not the society that is outside of the setting, like the set where they're doing the play. The set kind of takes place in that big warehouse sort of space, and that's where you see society collapsing. So it can be this Caden's responsibility to his own crew, that the people that were relying on him were like, everything was falling apart. They were, literally dying, falling into fascism. You see, like, the FEMA, it kind of looks like a FEMA site, like them being loaded onto military buses, like that sort of like kind of like in the movie Deep Impact, where they're all kind of, the military's escorting them all out, sort of like that sort of apocalyptic scene. But it's only in, in that warehouse is where you kind of see that. So is it, him saying that Caden has a responsibility to be taking care of, the people relying on him, his crew that have been, working for him for decades, and he's ignoring that? Or is he ignoring the conditions, surrounding him that he has control over, and he's not saying anything or doing anything about it? Is it his responsibility to society at large, or, just his own sphere of influence, which I think is another interesting, thing to consider, especially because, when you're thinking about these big societal issues and what role do I have as, just one person or an artist in speaking about them. When I met you, I met you at a show that I played as Hot Lettuce. That happened not even a week after the recent election. The election happened on Tuesday, and the show was on a Friday, and so it had been days. And I, as the first person going up at the show, a show of entirely queer and trans artists,
and audience,
every single person, like everybody there was queer or trans, or their best friend is queer and trans. Like it was a very, it was that circle, because that's the kind of, a circle that a lot of these niche music communities exist in.
my kind of people.
Exactly.
Love you all.
So shout out to the queers. Because Cybergrind as a genre is very, very queer and very rooted in, a lot of these niche music communities have a lot of these marginalized identities kind of involved in them, and Cybergrind is no different. And getting up on stage that day was horrifying because I felt that I had to say something. I can't, I have a platform right now. I don't want to just ignore everything, but at the same time, I'm one singular person, like, what am I going to do or say? Especially, everyone here knows that stuff is fucked up. They don't need me to sit here and tell you that stuff is fucked up. You don't need me to, explain that to you. But and that's kind of a bit of, what is my responsibility in that moment as an artist? And I was talking about it with Frauded, the headliner that day, and they're like, what do I have to offer? You have to ask yourself, what do I have to offer? And in that moment, what I had to offer, was my set, my music, and sharing, a little bit of strength and a little bit of hope with, with my own inspirations and, where I get my own hope, just, telling people to invest in their community, look to their community leaders, actionable items of, something that you can actually do to feel a little bit more safe and to feel that things, are a little bit more under your control. Anything, but it's such a big question to ask yourself of, like, as an artist, or as just one person, what can I offer? So, going back to the film, like, is that Charlie Kaufman critiquing himself for not doing enough for, his society? Is he saying that he's ignoring the problems, by making art? Is he ignoring everything happening outside of him by focusing on his art? Because, in that scene, Caden's still focused on the play, he's still focused on trying to make this the best it can be. And it's interesting that he wants something to be so truthful, yet he's ignoring the truth of what's happening around him.
Yeah.
And again, this is also something that's kind of glossed over in the film. Like, the society collapsing around him, it's not very prevalent in everything, yet, we can sit here and talk for forever about how what are the implications of that, and, what is he trying to say with this? And it's so daunting. I knew it was going to be daunting getting into talking about this film because, I even get flustered at points trying to talk about how many different aspects of this film that I want to talk about, because there's just so much.
So rich. It's an incredibly rich movie. I thought a little backstory for how Dominic and I met. I was visiting his comment about the everyone there was queer or trans or friends with a queer or trans person. That was me. When I went there, I was thinking about that actually earlier today, because again, I mentioned a couple times, I'm just gonna keep shouting out my channel, but getting a lot of new followers, and because I'm talking about dresses. As you can imagine, there are not a lot of straight dude followers, so kind of put me in a different thing. And one of the guys, what was the quote he said today? He said that I can't remember the quote, but it was like this, shout out to whoever you are. I'll try and remember to tag you or something, but this guy who has a cool TikTok channel, he made a comment about me having a great eye for a straight guy. He's like, I can't believe you understand these costumes for a straight dude. And I was like, I just thought it was interesting. That was the experience of mine at the show, was like a bunch of trans women, a bunch of gay dudes, non-binary, a bunch of queer people, and then little old me who just kind of looks like a dad. So that was to your point about art-wise, I kind of think that, like, you just kind of have to do what you do. I think, that's like, if it's on it, like, and he talks about, not even, now I'm sounding like Caden, but, like, if it's honest and, like, it is what it is, like, I don't know that you can even really almost choose to do what you're interested in and what you're doing. You kind of just, like, if it's the best art, I think, are the only stuff that really becomes meaningful is stuff that you just end up kind of doing because you really like doing it, and, like, it's kind of almost independent of society. It's nice that it has the beneficial impact of society. And I think generally, maybe this is like a weird sort of quasi-spiritual religious belief I have, but, like, I kind of think that stuff ends up kind of working out because, like, my interpretation of, like, your performance and Frauded, shout out Frauded, and I can't remember the other band that was there, but, like, for me, Children's it was very inspiring. Children's Crusade. Yeah. Oh yeah. Shout out Children's Crusade. It was really inspiring actually, as that was my first DIY show. I'd never been to a
Oh,
DIY
nice.
or like any of that type of. Yeah. Never. So it was fascinating because like the last, it just felt so. I was like, these are much more my people. Like, no offense to all the lovely people I met at the place I photographed before, but the concert I'd shot like a week or two before, was like a week or two before the election. Was a country show at a country and western bar. Is for the listeners. Sometimes I do concert photography and other stuff. DM if you want weird pictures.
They're fantastic.
But I had shot. It was yeah. Thank you. It was a concert of like a modern country artist. And like at just this like Southwest bar in, not Southwest, but like country western bar in Tennessee. Very different crowd, as you can imagine. Extremely different crowd. There might have been a Trump chant or two like that broke out like during the show, which was just like, it sucked. I was just like, fuck, this is not a good sign.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting going to that, to like the DIY show, because it was just like, I was really inspired by honestly like the strength and like the sort of like the kind of like, go fuck yourself determination of like the DIY, like just because I think, I mean, at least I really don't know much still about like DIY, but like just the medium of it, like having like the own space, shout out Archer Beach House, and like making their own space, and like having people out there who are doing like not mainstream stuff, like not like, Cybergrind or whatever else, just like getting up there and doing it. And like, Frauded show, which was great, which was like a very physical performance, where they're like switching instruments and like they're being very intense and like, but also like with that, like the beach house was also like, they had like, I think rules about like masking, and even still like, a couple years later, because they wanted to make sure that like, it's like all people that society was like, based on the course of the election, was like society was saying like, well, you're not really that valuable. It's like, it's like queer people, disabled people. It's like, well, you're okay, I guess, but like, you're not really okay. And, we're not really going to do much to help you, and kind of fuck you. So I think like just even the performance itself of like, to the point about like, that's one thing. It's like even in Cadence space, or even like the DIY space, which almost you could argue it's like the biggest DIY theater. Like it's almost like a DIY show he's doing, right? Mm-hmm. As I understand the term, maybe I'm misusing it, but yeah, I thought that like, just the act of, I thought it was interesting that like when I was watching Synecdoche, some part of me at least was like, man, he really is kind of up his own ass, like when doing it a little bit when he's making the show with the aspect of everything else going on. But at the correspondingly, I thought going to the show where I met you, where you performed, and these other like, a bunch of queer artists performed in their own space, that they were sort of like, like actively doing, and like, right after the election, in the context of it, I was like, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen. I was like, this makes me really hopeful for the future, because it's like, queer stuff and weird stuff has been underground before, and it might have to go slightly underground again, but like, you're not just going to die. Like, you're still here, right? So,
oh, absolutely,
that was really cool to see.
It was beautiful to hear everyone talking about how it's like, if we just lay down and give up, then that's what they want. That's what people in power want. They don't want you to think you have as much power as you do. They want you to feel hopeless and powerless, because then you don't do anything. And I'm, as someone who is so anxious and can be driven to such points where I just shut down, one of the things that I really tried to say is, when I feel the most hopeless, I turn to the people who are already out there, my community leaders, who to them, it's just another fight. They're unfazed by this. This is just, another week to them, another, they've already been so steeped in activism that this is nothing new. And I think that that's really like what I wanted to tell people and to focus on, was not just telling people that things are fucked up, but like to give some form of actionable, thing that someone can do, and some little form of hope, because, like I truly, after that, after the election results came out, I felt so just this darkness just consuming me, and this just expiration date that I constantly feel just creeping ever closer. I know it's not the way to live your life, but I live my life every day just knowing that there's an expiration date on things, and feeling like I can't trust that there's going to be a tomorrow. I definitely know that I will make decisions based on that. I'll fight for doing something because I don't know if I'm going to have another opportunity to do that again. And I feel just this like intense need to always be chasing that because of it. And that when the election results came in, I felt that that expiration date creeping ever more. And so it's like watching these movies and watching an artist struggle with knowing that expiration date is coming, be it a societal expiration date, as we kind of talk about the collapse that happens towards the end of Synecdoche, New York, or just your own your own health catching up to you and your own choices catching up to you. It's just this immense darkness, but like the hope that was at that show at Archer Beach House, and the hope exhibited within the DIY community, people that are creating a space for any kind of music, for not just for cybergrind, but for noise shows, or even for for screamo and emo violence, because those are that's its own scene, or for even indie rock and acoustic acts that just need a place to like perform. You don't have to make scary music in order for it to be valid. And there, in the post-COVID world, especially in Chicago, has been such a beautiful boom of DIY venues and DIY spaces. Obviously, shouts out to Archer Beach House, Archer Ballroom, which has been a fixation of the DIY scene here for quite a long time. But we've got newer spaces. Shouts out to Empty Bliss. Shouts out to My Place Ohio. There are so many really cool spots, not Susan's Apple Hole. I could go on, that are all, recent, some more than others, but recent additions to the DIY community, and are absolutely thriving because, we are creating spaces for ourselves. We are creating these spaces to exist. And that's this beautiful resilience that I see in the music community, creating your own space to exist. I struggle to kind of find like a film parallel there. But because like obviously with DIY film, it's hard to have a DIY film showing. There's some really cool indie movie theaters. I live close to the Music Box Theater in Chicago, which is a very cool indie movie theater that'll show absolutely whatever.
Shout out Music Box.
Yeah, that's such a cool spot. They'll let their employees show a 35 millimeter restoration of Resident Evil 3, which was one of the best times I've ever seen.
That's why I took the trip. I went up that trip I took was to go see. No, I'm sorry, that was the last trip. But the first time I went up to Chicago in years and years was to go visit my friend Nat, who had moved up there. She used to live in Tennessee and moved up to Chicago a year or two ago, and been talking about visiting her. And finally, the Music Box was showing a 35 mil copy of Gamer, from 2009, the Gerard Butler, at like midnight. Mm-hmm. So it was like, we got to see that,
because it's like a staff pick thing. Like they'll let their staff do like just a pick a movie, and it's I don't see that a lot in the film world, where there's just that level of like like creating that kind of a space, for absolutely whatever. And maybe I'm just not, as clued into the indie film scene as I am into the indie music scene. But
I don't know. I don't think you're wrong though, because like that was actually something I thought was really inspiring, to see it. I was thinking there, because do films and stuff, and like I've been helping. Yesterday I was helping my buddy out with the shoot, and like there's a group of us down in Knoxville where I live that are trying to do a little bit of it, but there isn't really a space like that. And I felt like it was like cool to see Archer Beast House, is like you could put a big screen and a projector, and like you could make this like I could show I could show a film there. And it's like, if I could show a film there, I can have an audience there, and if I can have an audience there, and they're willing to like come out and listen to Cybergrind and this other stuff, then like, and there people are willing to be open and find out something new, then it's like, well, I can just make what I want to make. Because I always feel the pull of like, should I make this one thing or should I make, that's the classic artistic thing, right? Of like, how much should you consider the audience or like whatever else? But seeing a show there, the DIY show, I was like, yeah, because like these people would watch something that I made. Absolutely.
It goes to the point that I made earlier about how you just have to make what you want and the right people will find it. That was something I kind of said earlier about how the right people will find it. And also, to the point that I tried to make earlier about how music production is so accessible. I think because music production has become so accessible, someone like me who because I do Hot Lettuce just on my laptop in Logic, just messing around, that wasn't possible, not that long ago. And so because music production is so accessible to where I can just learn everything I need to learn online and just learn by doing and messing around, and then put it out there on Bandcamp and, put it out on Spotify and the right people will find it. It's something specifically that I find with Cybergrind because, when I tried to earlier describe Cybergrind and got a little flustered because it's like, how do I describe such a wide breadth of genre? I sound so much different than my contemporaries in Blind Equation, who's, a good friend of mine. That's how I got into Cybergrind, or another good friend of mine who makes Cybergrind under the name First Grade Flight Club. All three of us sound completely different from each other, yet we are still Cybergrind because it's metal with an electronic influence and it's still primarily electronic. And, there's grindcore influence and all that. And, I can get into the, breaking down the subgenre. But truthfully, like the thing that I think is the most beautiful about Cybergrind, what brings all the artists together, is that every Cybergrind artist that I have ever met does it because they love it, because they wanted to do it, and they found a way to make their sound themselves. Everyone sounds so different because they had to find a way to make their sound. Their sound came out of, I want to make this music because I think that this electronic beat boot metal stuff is so cool, and I want to do it for myself, and I'm going to figure a way to do it. And in that, ingenuity, in that spirit, I think is what makes Cybergrind so unique and makes, this whole community so powerful, is because we're making music because we want to. We're making the music we want to hear truly for ourselves. And there are people that make art because they want that art to be perceived. They want to be famous for their art. They make art because they want it to be popular. And then there's people that make art because that's the art that they want to make. There's people that make art because this is the statement I want to make. This is what I want to put out into the world. I want to put my own story, my own emotions. I want to put myself into this and put it out in the world so that somebody can relate to it. The Hot Lettuce record that I put out last year, No Want, No Worry, is about some of the, the ugly emotions that I don't like to talk about. It's about me struggling through being religious and queer. And, when I was younger, being in the church and, wanting to self-harm myself because I thought that I deserved it because I was queer, like that's a really hard thing for me to talk about, but I can put it into a record. I can put that out and, put those feelings out there, not necessarily saying this is what this is, but those feelings that I experienced, putting that out in the world and hearing people relate to it, like that, it's that drive of, I want to share my story, and I want to have that out there for somebody that has also gone through it, that can relate to it. This same with Synecdoche New York. I want to share this story, and I want to share this pain. I want to share, these feelings, and, delivering that in a way that's not spoon feeding it to the audience, but in a way that an audience can feel and experience it. I know I've kind of...
What's a richer idea?
I know I've covered a lot there.
It's a rich... No, I think it's totally accurate. I think the thing you were saying before about audiences, like sort of more expecting to be kind of spoon-fed things. I had a argument with not an argument, but a discussion with a friend of mine. Yeah, discussion. Well, but she was talking about wanting subtitles, like when we were gonna watch a movie together, on subtitles on a movie. And I was like, I'm not anti subtitles because Lord knows I watch a lot of foreign movies, whatever else. But my preference, because like I'm such a cinematography, production design, everything else, is that I prefer if I can not watch them to not watch them. Also, partially sound design wise, like there's a lot of the time subtitles sort of give you more information than like you would otherwise hear in the sound design. I would love to, because my dad's near deaf. He's like hard of hearing, pretty. He's also near blind. My dad's got it rough.
Oh goodness.
Big movie lover though. Yeah, he loves his sound systems though. Even despite all that, he's always got great bass systems. Watching like Jurassic Park with him is insane. Like the whole neighborhood can hear it. It's crazy. But yeah, I was wondering about like a potential system to do subtitles like a little differently, where you could maybe do sound design with subtitles sort of visually. I've been meaning to think about that, try that out with something. Probably when I do my next short, I'm going to do it. Trying to like do my example of it,
especially from an accessibility standpoint too. Considering subtitles as an element of delivering a film. I'm a big subtitle person just because I think that it helps. But it also, I can see how it takes away from certain things, and it might also like clue you in a little harder to things that maybe a director didn't necessarily want to have front and center. Maybe that line was supposed to be muttered and it wasn't necessarily supposed to be heard in its full entirety.
Yeah, like in Synecdoche, why did you kill yourself, or why did like that little thing over? I think like subtitles provides like watching that with subtitles I think provides like a more declarative, like this is what was said, rather than like if there was some type of maybe slightly different way of doing it where it was like maybe it was faded or something. I don't know. There's like ideas I've had about how to do that, that because definitely accessibility. Like I don't want anyone to ever be not like that's obviously with a parent that's disabled in that way. Like I don't want that, but to the thing about like the reason and I lost my train of thought, but like the experiential thing you were talking about, I think like to your point about like producing emotions, like whatever emotions you put in, like still the audience getting whatever they have out of it. I think that's going to come through, because I think like after Lynch died, there's a David Lynch, a couple rest in peace, like a month or two ago. There's a lot of like his sort of method, and a lot of other filmmakers, even Chris Nolan, who's a very different director than Lynch, obviously, talks about like the need, like the term or the need or the desire for movies to be like sort of roller coaster like experiences that are like sort of meant to be intuitively interpreted. And I do think people get lost in that. But to your point, I think if you put that across in your music or in your movies or whatever, then there's going to be whatever emotions you actually explicitly say in the thing, or like whatever you communicate, but 99% of it, 90% of it compared to the 10% is going to be like what's implicitly conveyed in it, just by you deciding to do it, just by you deciding to put these things of editing, like these, like just which songs you put in the record, how you perform the songs,
the order of the songs. That come absolutely.
The order of the songs. Yeah. It's all just like the implicit stuff that I think that comes through a bit more. I did say before I wanted to talk through Returnal. So didn't know you were a gamer. That's cool. Are you a gamer?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I was about to say something really soft. I was like, oh, you must be a hardcore gamer, right?
Yeah.
Like, but no one should be that. Do not be that. That's very stupid if you are a Gamergate person.
Oh my God, Gamergate. My brain went like Gamergator, like you were calling me like a gamer alligator, like some sort of like.
Oh no.
Like that, like some sort of cute nickname, no. Like, oh, you little gamer gator, like not Gamergate. No, we don't like that. Alligators playing video games, yes, we are for that in this house. Yeah. But no, I'm a.
It's a flaw in me that I always think of the worst thing to say. So I always like when I say, oh, you're a gamer, I was like just always in my head. I'm just like, oh, I should ask him if he, obviously given background and everything. So, oh, are you a gamer gator? Do you really care about ethics and video game whatever bullshit those idiots like used to be racist and sexist and bigoted?
Yeah. Oh God.
No. Yeah. So just are you a gamer? Returnal?
Yeah. Or so I really really like roguelikes as a genre. So I've played.
Oh hell yeah.
Mostly play those. A big fan of Slay the Spire and Dead Cells and all those kinds of games. Shouts out my roguelikes. But I played Returnal recently within the last few months, and I've beaten it several times since, and similarly to Synecdoche, New York, I was absolutely gripped by the story and the delivery and the analysis of wanting to kind of figure it out for myself, the way that I interpreted that narrative. I'm assuming you've played through it all and dove into it as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I can tell that story. I'll tell it, but I'll just say like a acquaintance of mine was playing it, and then I was playing it, and then they got really mad at me because I was better at it than them, and I beat it before them. And they're like, I don't want to play it anymore. But I was just like, I just got really, not that I'm great at video games or whatever, I just got really like, I do play a lot of roguelikes, and I was Super Metroid was my favorite game as a kid, not to be too old. But like it was like a Super Metroid roguelike, first person Metroid. It reminded me of Metroid Prime. I don't know if you ever played Metroid Prime for GameCube.
Or like if you played the first not the first Castlevania game, of course, but Symphony of the Night on the PlayStation 1.
Yeah. For sure.
Absolutely excellent and similar sort of things.
I love roguelikes. Yeah, that's good to meet a fellow rogueliker. I normally play, I've been trying not to play as many because I'm trying to get a little bit more sleep. And I've been doing a lot more video editing, and like normally my time to play games is like I was like doing them to before I go to bed. So weird thing about me, I always playing with the sound off, and I want something that like will kind of put me more to sleep and not going to be too intense. And I listen to podcasts or music while I do it. So that's kind of like how I catch up on music and podcasts is like I'll play like 45 minutes when I'm doing that. I've been trying to use that time for sleep lately. But yeah, Slay the Spire. The Downfall mod's really good. I don't know if you where you get to play as the enemies. Super good. Shogun Showdown is another one. I played, if you like roguelikes, it's like my favorite one that I've played in a while. I don't know if you've played that.
Balatro the big one right now.
Balatro, yeah. Is it Balatro or Balatro?
It's both.
I've never heard it said.
Even the creator doesn't necessarily correct anybody.
Yeah, that one I had to put down. I for sure I beat like all of like one. I beat like I think a couple with each deck, and then I did like all the way up to the top on like one deck. I can't remember which deck it was, but then I was like, I'm just not gonna stop playing this if I do it.
Yeah, well,
that and Peglin.
Yeah, was great. Peglin's so much fun. So
straight guy gets on podcast and says he likes Peglin.
Yeah, don't get me excited here. You remember the reason I started talking to you was because I was flirting with you.
Yeah, that's been my experience, and a lot of I wish I was as attractive to straight women as I was to gay dudes.
Oh my god, you're a hit.
It makes my gay friends so upset. And I've learned actually, I've like, it's weird. Maybe you could, well, I don't know. This is, all right, you don't have to be the official like ethical decider. I need to ask like a panel of gay dudes. Like, I want to be like, I have a lot of friends that are gay guys, and I used to go with I used to be like a couple of my housemates were in college, and friends and so on. And at a certain point, I just like stopped going to gay bars with them because I always felt bad because it's like I always get like flirted with and like whatever else is like I don't want to like lead people on and then I don't want to like take up space and like this and that. But yeah, I don't know what the ethics are there, because like if let's say I'm a generous 4 on the straight scale or 5 or whatever, like that just doubles on the for whatever reason on the
I mean
whenever I go to a gay bar.
I mean, I don't know if
shout out all my gays.
I don't know if you know what a bear is. If you've heard that tossed around, but you know, there's certain niche communities that you fit in quite well, and are definitely a hit. So I understand it's tough. It's tough because you want to be respectful, but there's a certain implied I'm in this space, so you are opening yourself up to being flirted with, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with just being like, oh thanks, don't play for that team, but I appreciate the compliment. Like me as a gay dude who's flirted with many a straight man, like that's all you really have to say. Like all you have to say, like, you appreciate the compliment, but you don't play for the same team, and that's that's completely acceptable. Yeah. But I understand too, like you kind of feel like you're shooting people's dreams down a bit.
Yeah, I wish I did. I mean, honestly, I'd be like Bob Fosse. I would I would identify much more in terms of like success and relationships if I was like, I guess on that that side of it, because like, he's like the very successful one, confident, whatever. I'm sure if I just went off my experiences in gay bars as opposed to straight bars, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm a solid one. But
God, it sounds like the Hinge has been rough, hasn't it?
Hinge has always been it's I don't know. That's a that's a great question. I don't know. It's I probably shouldn't get into the whole years and years of therapy on it, but it's been fun. It's been interesting. I got out of a long relationship last year, and it's been interesting sort of getting back on the dating side and kind of finding out all that. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious, like, I was considering still considering at some point moving up to Chicago, and I've been, especially like post-election and all that stuff. So I don't know where I'm going to necessarily end up, but that's also, I don't know if that's part of it too. Like, being like someone who's friends with a bunch of queer people and like, just kind of more of a weirdo, owns 1900 movies, whatever. I don't know if it's just like, because when I see like people on Hinge who like move to like, who say like new in town or like new to Tennessee, it's always like, oh yeah, conservative, and like, I'm looking for my cowboy, I'm looking for this and that, and like, I'm getting a cowboy. I love, it's like, the sad irony is I probably watch more Westerns than anyone they would be interested, like, because I love Westerns, and like, they're like, yeah, so it's like, but they're all, 40s, 50s. So I don't know. Yeah, it's, I don't know. How's the experience up in Chicago?
I mean, it's interesting. I think that what's really cool about Chicago is just it is a very, very queer city. We have it's not called Boys Town anymore, but we did have Boys Town. It was actually called Boys Town for a long time. Now it's North Halsted. But like that, like there's technically like 3 gay neighborhoods, because like you've got North Halsted, you have Andersonville, which is where all of the gays that get a little old, they get older and they don't want to party in North Halsted anymore, move up to Andersonville. And then we have Rogers Park, that's
so funny.
We have Rogers Park, which is just full of bears. All the bears just move up to Rogers Park, and it's like, and there's plenty of gay bars in all of these areas. And
my confidence is flagging. I'll go up to Rogers Park and just be like,
I can give you 4 or 5 bars that you can step into. Shout out to the Sofo Tap, and shout out to the Two Bears Tavern Group, that you can just walk into and you would be an 11. It's kind of funny in that way. My partner, not to kind of get to divulge his life, but when he kind of started to frequent those spaces, realized, wow, I am a lot more attractive than I thought I was. So it's an experience for sure. I'm very grateful to be in a city that is so just ridiculously queer, to where like, I love drag. I love, I mean, Hot Lettuce itself, like, is ridiculously queer, like just music wise. And, to be able to play a full, like multiple times I've played full bills, to tie it back to the music thing. Multiple times I played full bills where every single artist on the bill was queer or trans or had a queer or trans member in it. And that's not possible everywhere. It's so cool that there is so much room for that here. And how many people that I meet that, from other cities that come here and feel that acceptance. Chicago is just a special city in and of itself. I think you either get Chicago.
I really enjoyed it.
You get Chicago or you don't. Like, there's people like Chicago's a personality. And you either get it and you fit right in and you understand it, or you don't and you move to LA. But Chicago,
I really liked it. I hadn't been back since I was a kid. I lived in New York in Brooklyn for a couple of years, and like probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it was nice. It's definitely, but you're absolutely right. The vibe was totally different in Chicago. It's funny you say Andersonville, because that was actually before I moved up. I set my little, I think it was my Tinder flag to Chicago. Just be like, what's up? I'll be in town for a weekend, and I think it was the day after the show, I had a very nice date with a girl who was saying, like, trying to convince me to move up to Andersonville. So it's funny that would be one of the This is a very super sweet date. Very nice girl.
It's a lovely neighborhood.
She was just like, yeah, you should move to Andersonville. Yeah,
it's.
I didn't know it was one of the 3 bear hotspots.
Yeah, it's just one of the super, like, because there's a couple gay bars up in Andersonville. You know, there's Atmosphere. There's Replay, which isn't technically a gay bar, but like they host a lot of drag events. You know, it's just kind of where the community sort of congregates. I guess
that's cool.
But it's just the fact that it's so prevalent here. You know, I grew up in the suburbs, so I didn't, you know, really grow up too super far away. And, you know, I moved to.
Are you from Chicago?
Yeah. Well, again, the suburbs. I grew up like, you know, about an hour and a half north. But I went to DePaul, so you know, I moved to the city for school, and then I just kind of never left.
Cool.
And, you know, I had been coming down to the city for shows forever as it was, so I've just always felt super comfortable here. And the community that we have, you know, just in general, you know, be it the music scene, be it the drag scene, be it the art scene, you know, because I see so many different like fun makers markets and, you know, different kinds of like, you know, like people who craft, you know, having spaces, you know, even at the same venues that I frequent for music, you know, like there's so much community here. And you know, I think that's really cool. Or like I play Magic the Gathering, and the Magic the Gathering community here is sweet, is fantastic as well.
I had to trade in all my. I mean, I used to have a big collection. I traded in most of it and switched it to movies because I never ended up playing it. I liked collecting them, and I still have like some like special ones. But
it's hard. You need
a lot of goblins.
You need community for it. Because otherwise you're just sitting and collecting cards, and it's similar with music. You know, you need community for it. Otherwise you're just sitting there and writing riffs. Like, you know, you need community, or else you're just like, you know, even if you know, are just uploading it to the internet, like, you know, you still find community that way. You know, if with Hot Lettuce, when it was just sitting on my hard drive, you know, it wasn't doing me any good. It wasn't doing, you know, it wasn't doing anything. And so, you know, it just like your cards, you know, your cards will just sit there. Obviously you can appreciate them on your own. Like I can listen to my own demos. But it needs community.
I do want to, since you're a Magic fan, I want to give you 1 second because I have these.
Hey.
We'll do something fun.
Nice.
So I used to, like I said, I had a collection.
Mm-hmm.
This will be really fun. I have mostly have them in storage, but I have some packs that I have been. So we'll do a live. This will make good social content.
Little live pack opening here.
Yeah, a little live. So I have a Jumpstart.
Okay.
Right. Some of these could be valuable. I have a Jumpstart. I've been meaning to like ship these in and sell them. I have a couple of Unfinities.
Unfinities, right? Hilarious. Yeah.
And then I have probably the Charm Boot where you could really pull something valuable. I have a couple of old Hour of Devastation, and I have some Amonkhet.
Ooh.
So I've had these for months and months and months because I basically sold it and I was planning on selling it back. I don't know how much these packs are worth. How much is a pack? Do you know how much a pack of Amonkhet is worth? It's probably.
Is it pen?
You more of just a collector or a player?
I'm much more of a player. The packs are about $10, $12 online.
Okay.
I'm from about 2017.
See, a man weighs $10. Yeah, the reason I used to buy these is because I really like those the Egyptian themed cards.
Oh yeah.
So I pulled one of them. I pulled the like, you know, like this. It's, I can't remember what they're called, like masterpiece editions or whatever. The special, like you can. There's like a one, and it's like a golden ticket thing.
The serialized ones, the ones that are like numbered.
Yeah, I think they're called Amonkhet Vacations, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Gosh, it's been so long since I've.
Oh, it's not the Inventions, is it? Or that's Kaldesh.
No, Amonkhet Invocations. So they have the same. The Kaladesh ones have a different. I think they're slightly rare. These are
it's
1%.
Oh yeah. It's the same sort of deal. Those like the kind of like Egyptian-y looking arts. There was a very good one of the card Worship that just looks like a bunch of people bowing down to a big pair of feet, and I think that one is
that's cool.
It's very funny. It's a big hit in the foot fetish.
Is it
community.
worth more on like? I was gonna say because. Man, if I pull that, that'll be so sick.
Pull that full art worship. Yep.
I think the one I pulled was, I can't remember what it was. I pulled one, and then my former partner who played, she bought a bunch of packs and pulled like I think she pulled one of the gods.
Mm-hmm.
I think she might have pulled like the scarab god. I think I pulled. It was like a sorcery or something that was like something that I wouldn't really ever use. I remember just being like, "Oh, this is cool," but I wish it was kind of something. Maybe it was Vindicate. Potentially it was Vindicate, like destroy target. This is probably, if you're listening to this,
us ramble about
magic.
Yeah, I mean, between this and the roguelike chat.
Yeah, we got to do some.
Should he open
ASMR.
it or should he keep it sealed?
I've never done one of these. I always wanted to do one of these.
Huge pack opening.
Okay, so we got
live pack opening.
Huge pack. Yeah, live pack opening. Do this. Okay, first card. What is that? Bloodlust Insider. I won't do the whole pack, but we'll go.
Anything you find is cool. I've got my app on hand to check your prices for you.
I love it. You want to know how much this is? Also, when you talk about health anxiety, to the extent I have like OCD, so I have all my movies listed. When I say I have 1981 movies, like I have them all listed down to like the, all the thing. With my Magic cards, I had them all listed too, and I like spent on the TCG or whatever just scanning in every collection, which was like 10,000 cards. So it was
That's what I do.
Okay, I got a couple. Yeah, Embalmer's Tools, Stir the Sand, Grasping Dunes. Oh, I think this is. I don't know if this is worth it. Cascading Cataracts, is that?
That is a
destructible
$2 card, but with Magic the Gathering, I think the resale market on Magic is a little less so than like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh.
Put that up for the camera.
Look at that beautiful $2 land.
Sorry, putting that up from this. So what did we lose? We lost. I guess it was like $8 because these packs cost.
I don't know. You could have pulled something that you don't realize is worth something, because some of the cards that like don't necessarily look like much or have a niche place in like a niche CEDH or competitive deck, and so you never know with these things.
I got excited when I saw a land, because I know typically like I'd randomly gotten back into Magic like and bought a bunch of packs when they had like the pay 2 life double lands, and those ended up being worth like $20-$30 a piece after a while.
Those shock limbs and any of those are you'd think, because they're just like mana producing cards, like they look really boring. I
forgot to ASMR this one. I'm bad at this.
This is new territory for the Trade Movies podcast, breaking into the pack really opening market.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so you got what are we doing? Painted Bluff. That's okay. You got another Stir the Sands. I wish there was a better way. Okay, I don't think this is worth much. Haven Mind Sensor? Is that
what card?
Haven Mind Sensor.
Let's see.
I think this is Bird.
It is
Flash Flying.
From the let me make sure that I'm looking up the Amon cat. This is another $1.94 set card. Look at you.
Awesome. Look at that. I also got a cat. So there you go for all the cat fans out there. Sacred Cat.
I do love that.
All cats are sacred.
All cats are sacred. I do actually run that card in one of my decks. What would you know?
That's great. I think all right, we're doing. Oh, I forgot.
Got it.
Do this. Okay. Yeah. This is.
God.
I did not think this was going. I would not have guessed I would be talking about Returnal and Magic the Gathering. So this is sick.
No, I just bring all my nerd shit into everything that I talk about. And you had to talk about something a little lighter, considering we've been talking about dying and health anxiety for the last 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I just like I like hearing about what people are into. Honestly, that's half the reason I wanted to have you on, is because like I knew nothing about DIY, Cybergrind, punk spaces like that. I grew up my high school. It's called Drama. We're delaying the reveal of it. It feels good because there's a lot of. I think there's going to be something here. It feels like heavier, and I'm already into the silvers. But I went to a small public 270 kid high school in rural East Tennessee. So it was just like we didn't have AP classes. It was just like I think graduating class was like 39, 40, very rural. So there was just nothing. So yeah, hearing people's like. All the stuff about like getting into DIY or DIY shows, or like, I don't know, we just didn't have a lot of that cool shit around where I grew up. So I know basically nothing about it, which is cool. But we got a double. What the I don't know if this has ever happened.
Like a dual face card?
Well, we got two of the same card.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Can't remember the last time that's happened.
Is that a good omen?
I don't know. It's the double of Mouth and Feed. One is I got a Gilded and one is not. I don't think that's very good. I mean, create a 3/3 green hippo token. and then
it's not worth very much, but those cards are cool.
They're cool, yeah.
That's the thing with a lot of Magic cards too. Is like I don't know if be able to see if I move, but all of my bulk Magic is like sitting behind me, and I have it all organized,
sick,
in
very
beautiful
nice
ways. But you know, I think
I don't know where mine are.
I think with Magic, you know, because you know, with social media, the Pokemon pack openings are very popular. Same with Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think the resale market on those are because more people collect them to collect them, versus I think with Magic, more people I think play than just collect. You know, I could be wrong, but in my experience, I've seen like it's mostly like people play it versus, you know, with Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! It's more of a collector friendly sort of thing. But you know, I really brought it up too. You know, I talking about all these nerdy things. You know, it seemingly kind of non sequiturs that don't necessarily relate to what we're talking about with these films. But I think that it all kind of ties into the sense that, like, you know, you do need a bit of community. You need that community. You need that connection. You know, I work from home, so I need some sort of community and connection. Otherwise, I'm just sitting here at home. And you know, I find that community and that connection, you know, through Magic, through music. I mean, even through video games. I play Returnal's a co-op game, and I played that through with a close friend of mine, and we sat through and we played it together in every story beat. You know, discovering, you know, through the story of Celine, and you know, going through that together and then discussing it together. You know, Returnal's another, you know, abstract story about grief and about trauma and about sorting through that, about regret, and, you know, engaging with another, not just, you know, with myself on that, but engaging with another person. And, you know, what did you take out of that? You know, in getting another perspective is important. You know, whether you're talking about a video game or you're talking about a silly video about a Star Wars hotel, like the engagement, with the things that you love and the community that comes out of that, is really important. It's, you know, it all starts with a thing that you like, you know, even sports. You know, you're engaging with, like, you know, I'm not a big sports guy, but you're engaging with the thing that you love, finding other people that are also equally engaging with the thing that you love, and you're building a mutual bond based on that.
Yeah, I got my Mets hat. It's actually a combo Mets hat, but it's a Bad Lieutenant. I don't know if you can. So it's shout out. I think it's And After That did the I think he did the shirt too. But yeah, wore it because that's another movie where it's a honestly thematically I thought it was similar. And I really love Bad Lieutenant. Have you seen Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel? It's like he's a very not good person in that movie in many ways. But it's like it's also like one of the most Catholic things I've ever seen, because it's another thing if he just wants to be loved. He's actually a lot like Caden. I think, to me, I felt like this, you know, try to wear a different hat, but the like depending on the movie, but yeah, this one is like, it was a guy wanting to be loved, and like very much he's just like, it's a very like empathetic portrait of like just the shittiest cop you'll ever see in New York, and who's just like, he's like just awful person, but he's just like, it just kind of explores like the shattered nature of who he is and what that means. It's a really good movie. Also, Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans with Nick Cage is really good in a different way. But yeah, I totally that community thing. That's exactly right. Like, this is gonna straight dude code me for sure. But like, you know, that was one of the things I don't listen to anymore for what should be apparent, like extremely obvious reasons if you're listening to this. But I really back in the day actually liked Joe Rogan's show. I used to listen to it because I like MMA. I know that's always a dangerous thing to say, right? Just turn. But like he's a dumbass. Like he's always been a dumbass. But the thing I liked about listening to his show way back in the day was that he would just kind of get someone on and just talk to him, and there wouldn't really be like a format or anything else. He just like, yeah, what's up? Let me hear about you. Like whatever you kind of want to talk about. Now, it used to be that he would get like, you know, someone who thought the pyramids were secret spaceships, and then he'd get some comedian, and then he would get like some, you know, someone else. Now he's just getting like a bunch of right-wing idiots, and he's constantly just, you know, the show has changed, and like I
don't want to give Joe Rogan credit because I don't want to give Joe Rogan credit for anything, but something that he is good at is, and the reason why his show got as popular as it did is because he's quite good at yes-anding people and giving them what they need to go off. You know, whether that is someone that's being absolutely ridiculous and a right-wing conspiracy theorist, whether it's a comedian, you know, whoever it is,
he'll believe anything.
There's a very funny like joke online that like Joe Rogan is just like a caveman who was brought to like modern times and is just like asking people to explain him things. Like he's like, oh yes, the sun shine in the sky. You explain to Joe where it goes at night. Just
that's absolutely true.
And he's quite good at getting, you know, a great interview out of a person, you know. But the thing that starts to become problematic is he lets people spout absolute bullshit and then gives it validity. Especially when it's, you know, this absolute right wing bullshit. I mean, the show has changed, so I understand, you know, you know, saying that you liked it back in the day, because it's not the same thing as it was. You know, it's definitely taken on its own identity.
It's been an interesting experience actually with that, because that's not the first time that's happened. I used to like when I was a kid, I really liked Loveline. Shout out Loveline. I don't know if you ever listen to Love. It's probably also, again, our age gap, problematic
not to
age gap
myself.
Podcast relationship.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Well, it was even before my time, because I remember I used to get it like there just would be websites when I was in high school and like middle school and college that I would get it from. But I would listen to the old. It was like kind of a before podcasts, because it was are you familiar with Loveline at all?
Not to age myself.
So it was like, yeah. So it was well, it was on for the most famous incarnation of it was with Adam Carolla of the Man Show and Dr. Drew of Dr. Drew's Rehab and all that. And if you know them from any time in the last like 10, 15 years, you think Adam Carolla is like a right wing blowhard who's, you know, he's like palling around with like Dennis Prager, that moron, and like Dr. Drew is like, you know, just doing these really like awful reality shows about people's addiction. But there was a lot of like really like Loveline, like when they were on Loveline together, it was like 97 to 05. Like it was Dr. Drew's radio show that he had done. It was like a call-in show 10 to 12 at night based in LA, where like primarily I think West Coast, but anyone across the country would like call in and you would explain your problem. It'd be like, he's a doctor, and then Carolla was a comedian, or he'd have other people. So it'd be like, you know, I'm having an issue at school. What should I do? Or like, you know, my dad is doing this, or my mom's doing this. What should I do? But honestly, they were like, it was a fascinating show, because they would go into like go to therapy. They would like tell every caller, like, you need to go to therapy. You need to like, you know, like try and like work on yourself. It'd be a guy be like, I'm pining over, you know, this girl or this guy that I want to like date. And they'd be like, don't do that. Like, you know, like try and take care of yourself. Like, that's not going to be a thing that you can do to convince them. Or they'd like, you know, would highly encourage people to like get out of like abusive relationships and all that. And like a lot of it was really good. But then like once they left the show, it's like, well, Carolla just became like a right wing. He just sort of like went insane with right wing stuff. And then Dr. Drew, I think, went insane in his own way, in a really sad way. So it's like, yeah, it's like, I'm sure it's happened to me more times than that. But like yeah, it's like, I can't remember the last time I listened to Rogan, but yeah, I do think it's like, it's a community thing. You know, as I open up, we're switching into we're still here. Hour of Devastation.
Oh,
pack.
nice.
I think I'm going to open one of these.
I will again.
Yeah,
I have got my app open to check your prices for you. Okay, so I'm speaking from a point of authority here.
Absolutely, I love it. I think I uninstalled the app finally, because I didn't
free yourself from your earthly tether.
It really was. Okay, so we are Hour of Eternity. Is that something? Hour of Eternity.
That is a 12-cent card.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this does not seem good. Oof. Okay, we're not doing well today, but what are you gonna do? Sometimes
you should look at. You should definitely like look at all your pulls, because you might have something that you like don't realize is very good. Because especially in Magic, sometimes a card will get released that breaks another card that was previously nothing. I have a very shitty like Kraken card called Spawning Kraken that was worth about 6 cents until they changed the rules about octopuses, and there was a slight rule change that made it so that card went from a couple of cents to like $12. So things happen and card prices shift and skyrocket. When for all my Magic players, when Shuko first came out, no one cared about that equipment, and then Nadu was released, and Nadu broke Shuko, and so all of a sudden the prices for that card shot up exponentially. So that does happen. But it's the reason why I love Magic and why I bring it up is because, like, with you, even though you haven't played in a while, you have a base familiarity, and like you have positive memories, and like you've got packs laying around, like, the amount of times where I bring up, oh yeah, I play Magic, people like either that play or that used to play, like immediately that's, a point of conversation. That's a fun topic, a point of relation. And it ties perfectly into what I mentioned about community and connection is, it's an immediate thing that you have with a person that, you can, instantly break down those initial barriers of awkwardness and, see someone and kind of bond in that way. When I mentioned roguelikes, it's like, oh my goodness, like there's another point in which, we can kind of relate on, and then, then it gets to the deeper things of, talking to someone about health anxiety and, it's
we reversed that, we went health anxiety straight away, and then
we kind of started out hot there. But
do you think
oh,
go ahead,
no,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm not saying anything important.
Do you think like what was I gonna say, like the I asked that last week. So the episode I did last time was with my friend Tyler, and we did Hanabi. He did Dawn of the Dead, which he told me was his favorite movie. So I picked mine, which was Hanabi, and I wanted to do it because I think I mentioned at the beginning, like, yeah, it's like I wanted to become closer friends with him. So I was like, I was interested in sort of like doing that as a way to get to know people. I think it was, at the beginning, like, we met once for like a few minutes, but like at the DIY show, and then we've spoken on Instagram, invited you on the pod, and talked about it. But then, like, I think, do you find like that, like, I guess when you watch something like this, like, it felt to me like more easy and comfortable talking with you, because it's like, just based on what you were saying about Synecdoche and all that jazz, just by way of talking about it, is almost like, it's a kind of an easier way to like connect, where normal I probably wouldn't tell anyone about my health anxiety for like, until I was like pretty close with them, right? So do you find that, is that like useful in art? Do you find that in music as well, or just like all
absolutely 150% using my like art as an avenue to discuss these things, especially because, like, I was willing to talk about the health anxiety stuff going into this, just because I felt like it was important to my own like appreciation of the film, and I couldn't properly articulate why the film means so much to me if I didn't talk about the health anxiety, just because, like, that is one of the aspects that really sticks out to me. So I went into this knowing that I would talk about it, but it's not something that I am usually very apt to do. I recently went through a lot of issues health wise, and started opening up to some friends about it, and I told a couple of friends what I was going through, and they were like awestruck. They were like, I had no idea, not like oh my god, that's so fucked up, but like, I had no idea that like your entire life you've been struggling with like being a hypochondriac. Like, I had no idea about you, and these are friends that I've known for a decade plus. And it kind of made me think, like, people that are in my life that have known me for so long don't even know this about me, and this is something that I like really, really struggle with. Maybe that's something I should consider, opening up about more. Just kind of like as a general thing in my life that I've been going through. But like, I find that using something like this, because it made you feel more, you said, relate to this movie because of the health anxiety. Like, that instantly was like, okay, like, I feel so much more comfortable talking about this kind of thing, because I'm talking about it to someone that gets it. When I talk, there's in the Hot Lettuce, for example, the whole record is, about such ugly emotions, and, talking about like when I was a teenager and I was going to church every week, and how I like actively was, you know, having suicidal ideation just because I thought that I deserved to die because I'm gay. Like I was, you know, raised Catholic, like going through something like that, and, you know, writing about that in a song, I think is a little bit easier for me to like process that too. And kind of talk about that by writing about it, as, you know, as opposed to just like bringing it up in a random conversation. And, you know, when engaging with people about my art, because I've had people talk to me about the religious aspects of my music, because it's a prominent, you know, piece of it. You can definitely hear that when listening to it. And I've had discussions of people who also like grew up in the church similarly to how I did, you know, talk about those feelings. And like, I'm not going to start a random conversation with a stranger about like, hey, like when I was, you know, a teenager, like X, Y, and Z, because I was, you know, religious and queer. But like, you know, when someone messages me on Instagram, or, you know, after a show, like, you know, saying that stood out to them, you know, it immediately endears me to a person and shows me like, you know, I can let that wall down, and I can talk about that because that's something that they also experience. And it makes it easier, definitely, for me to kind of be open about the uglier and the harder things to talk about. You know, talking about being scared of death and, you know, wanting my life to mean something is not necessarily a conversation that I'm going to have with everybody, but, you know, when it's meaningful and we're engaging in this, absolutely.
Sometimes it's the only way I process things. Like I've talked with my, by the way, before, it's commit in memory.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So just going right from, commit memory. As I'm going to do, what I committed to memory was, the scene where he's just sitting on the bed in Synecdoche and he just like randomly starts shaking and has a seizure. Mm-hmm. First of all, what great acting by Philip Seymour Hoffman. But also, I think about that probably every day of just like, oh, maybe I'm just like, maybe like today's the day I'm just going to start shaking. Like I've even like, I feel like I've hyped myself into like, like it's hard for me to watch stuff with like strobe lights a lot, because like I just worry like I've never had a seizure, and like I'm not, knock on wood, even then I knock on wood, I'm not epileptic or whatever, but like I just feel like, well, what if this is the time? What if it's because it's just I haven't seen the particular type of thing? Mm-hmm. Like, so every time I see strobe lights, I kind of look away, which was a real issue with the first episode I did, the time machine, on this podcast, because like when they go through time, epilepsy warning on that, they just like the fucking movie strobing for like 5 minutes straight, and it's just like, but every time I see them, like, well, maybe this is the thing that gets me, and then I start to get in my head of like, oh my god, you're about to have a seizure, and it's like I've never had one, I don't know what that is, but you know, it's just still, when Hoffman just started like doing that, I was just like, now I'm gonna like, you know, commit to memory. I'm gonna commit to memory the idea of maybe I'll just be sitting on a couch and I'll just start convulsing. Like those thoughts run through my fucking head constantly.
Oh my god.
It's just really, you know, it's
the littlest bit of like stomach indigestion, I'm like, oh yep, my appendix is bursting, it's happening.
Oh yeah.
So
stomach indigestion, like the and again, to your point about like every once in a while, it's like something, it is something, like, again, not to go, you know, shout out my my gastrointestinal tract, but you know, I'm of a background on one side of my family where apparently that's more common, and like for just people to have like GI issues, and so I had GI issues, and I ended up this is gonna, if we haven't turned people off with the magic dog, but I had to get a colonoscopy early because like, no, I'm only 34. I don't think you're supposed to get them till, I should probably look that up. I don't think wasn't supposed to get one at like 31, 32, but I was having some issues, and I had to go get one, and it turns out I had like a couple of like early polyps that they had to remove like 2 years ago. So it was just like, and that the weird thing was like that wasn't even necessarily the thing that was causing the other thing. It was just that like I just had to end up doing it, and then like if I hadn't gone when I was 31 or 32, then potentially that could have been bad, because I would have waited until the normal time when they said that based on my background I wouldn't necessarily. And if you have Ashkenazi Jewish heritage at all, and you're you should go get that checked, just because I was realizing I'm probably gonna give everyone health anxiety who's listening to this if I say like check your background. I'm not saying what background, but if you have my mom's side is Jewish, and so if you have like, I think Ashkenazi Jewish, I think there's like something where you have like more susceptible to GI issues, like that is how it was explained to me. but yeah, I had to go. There's like polyps, and like it didn't turn out to be the thing that was happening, but it was just like, I guess that was fortunate for me. And then, I had to go tell people in my family like, hey, you should probably get checked out early just in case. And it's just, yeah, it's and so that's just like, it's fun. It did help me confront that. I mean, just watching Synecdoche first time and this time and all that jazz. Yeah, like how did you like the I guess like the final dance number on that? Isn't that something? Isn't that probably?
It was entrancing. It was gorgeous. It was haunting, and I think it really is the peak of when it because that movie does get, like I said, surreal towards the third act. But it's this beautiful climactic point where you've like kind of at this point realized what's going on. I watched it with my partner, and he kind of called out the first time we watched it. He's like, yeah, like there's probably going to be a number with his ex-wife, with Katie and his daughter, and like it's kind of going to be this, this overarching full circle moment, even to the point where it like mixes in the TV show that he had been watching. How
that jump is so good when it jumps from like it pans up. I wrote that down. When it pans up onto the hospital monitor, and then it the TV show starts playing on the hospital monitor itself, like transitions from the little pulse, and then it jumps in, and now you're there. It's like, that's so good.
Exactly. And just like the way that it like brings you into it, like that, because that TV show had been kind of playing a bit throughout the film. And kind of how it like ties that in, and like, because almost like it's in his psyche because he had been watching it so much. But that whole final climactic scene, I think it really brings it full circle and like commits fully to the surreal and absurd, and like this is this like full on production. It's and then like the way that it uses dance and everything too, like to convey it, and like the movements, because like we haven't really talked about it much, but Fosse is obviously very known for his movements, known for the sort of like cellular, like moving blob of a group of individuals that he kind of choreographs. Kind of seeing that signature style used to convey, the whole basically his life story at the end there. It's so well done, and such a visual, like so much visual impact. I thought that it was such an interesting choice to end in such a climactic way almost, and then immediately after it just him being zipped up into a body bag, versus Synecdoche New York kind of ends on like a whimper, and it just kind of trails off. This was like big moment into hard cut. Obviously very intentional in that way.
Yeah, it was so good. I think it's probably, I've seen a lot of musicals in the last year. I've tried to like rectify. I hadn't seen a lot of them, and I just love musicals. And I feel like I haven't seen a lot of, like, I'm trying to think of the ones since then. It feels to me like this is maybe the most advanced. Like, I don't know that there's a more modern musical that's came out in terms of like the evolution of the form. Talking about like form and like whether music or video games or movies or whatever, but like it doesn't, like, I'm kind of like the self-consciousness of it and like the meta breaking of it. Like, I'm trying to think of the great music. This came out in 79, I believe, or 78. The great musicals that have come out since then are, I think my favorite is probably 20 centimeters, which most people don't seem to know. Highly recommend that if you haven't. That is actually, I need to do a video on that because I haven't seen Emilia Perez. I know people have like mixed opinions about it. I don't, I generally, I'd like to go see it. I have, but 20 centimeters is a trans themed musical from 2005 in Spain. And I watched it as part of like a section on gay film in college for a course I was taking. Watched that along with Short Bus, which was so funny to watch with a bunch of other, a lot of my poor sheltered classmates were very uncomfortable watching Short Bus, and The Celluloid Closet, which shout out is a great documentary for that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of movies like 20 centimeters, and I haven't seen Chicago. I haven't seen Wicked, which I think is, or whatever that came out this year. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like, has there been any musical like this that's come out since 79 that has like progressed past this? Because this seemed very responsive to the point, like to like Singing in the Rain and like Bandwagon and Calamity Jane and like Sound of Music and everything that came before it. And like it seemed like it was like very consciously like taking all those and kind of doing almost like an anti-musical. And until then, to your point, it reveals at the end like this is the most choreographed thing that's ever been. But I don't know. Do you like musicals? Are you familiar with a lot of them? Like
here and there. I will come out and say that I'm definitely not the biggest musical fan. If I tell you that my favorite musical, like stage play musical, is the Evil Dead musical, you'll probably laugh at me, but it is true. Absolute I haven't seen it, and this is terrible East Tennessee person. I haven't even seen Evil Dead. Oh,
even though it was filmed like I think right near me in Morristown.
A film that I've seen that you haven't. Crazy.
It happens a lot. You said Bob Fosse about his style. Have you seen Cabaret? I haven't seen Cabaret. Too.
No, I'm familiar. And I mean, you brought up Chicago too. Chicago is another one.
Can you hold on one sec before you? Sorry, my headphones just died, so I need to.
No, you're good. I'm gonna get up for 2 seconds.
I appreciate you going this long. This has been a real Joe Rogan one.
Yeah, no, I've tried to be succinct. I especially in the beginning was a little like flustered, like just because there's so much I want to talk about, both with this movie, with Cybergrind, with being an artist. There really is so much, even as to when we got on the video game track talking about games like Returnal, like just media in general that is open to interpretation and open, that gives, like I said, gives the listener an opportunity to, or the listener, the viewer, whatever the player, the opportunity to have their own experience with it. I think just as an artist, that is something that I really strive for. You want somebody to be able to have not just their own experience, but a powerful experience with it. That's what Caden wanted in Synecdoche, New York. He wanted to deliver a piece of theater that was honest and truthful and powerful, and the artistic statement that he wanted to make. Joe Gideon was trying to push himself, to create a provocative and interesting piece of theater. They say many times throughout the film that he is he's scared of mediocrity. He's scared of being boring. You see that him trying to grasp with that the whole film, trying to push himself and push the boundaries, and to create art that's meaningful. And I think that that's really what I wanted to kind of focus on when talking about both of these movies, in trying to relate it to myself. I understand that I make silly, a lot of people kind of think it's silly, when you listen to it, because it's a lot of screamy beat boops and tongue-in-cheek little samples here and there. It comes off a little ridiculous on the surface, but at the end of the day, like, it is a very genuine piece of myself that I put a lot into it, with Hot Lettuce. And it's it's easy to get caught up in wanting your art to be perceived a certain way. I get very caught up in wanting people to to resonate with what I do and think it's cool and think it's interesting. But at the end of the day, I really try to take out from, Synecdoche, New York, and, as through my life, is if you get so caught up in the creation of that, and you get so caught up in, the minutia of it, you don't create, it never happens, like when one of the actors says, when are we going to get an audience in here? It's been 17 years, what's the point of doing it if no one's able to appreciate it? And it's to allow for the appreciation, to allow for the engagement in the community, to allow for something like this where you and I can sit here for hours. We've been sitting here for like 3-4 hours, and I can sit here for 3-4 more talking about different aspects of Synecdoche, New York.
Absolutely.
Speak with me.
I feel like I have a new friend. This is exciting. It's cool to
We've literally talked like once before this too, so it's for the listeners, you're basically watching us become friends in real time.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. It's great, honestly. It's like that's the idea behind like the even the podcast was like, just connecting with people, trading. Like I think movies became more and more of a social thing for me, where it's like I think connecting with them and honestly all art, but I think like. Yeah, by way of like what you chose and how we've talked about it, I feel like it's almost just like a shortcut to, I think, like developing sort of a deeper friendship with people, which is neat, So that's really cool. So yeah, we'll have to. Honestly, we might do maybe we'll do a trade games podcast or something, because I do want to talk about Returnal, but maybe we'll have you back on to do like a roguelike episode or something. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I tried. I know that we brought that game up a bunch, and I tried to tie it in a little bit. But that is a podcast truly in and of itself. If you Returnal is absolutely one of my favorite games in the entire universe. So if you want to talk about the philosophy and dive into that, I'm all here for it.
So preview for the listeners, we'll definitely we'll definitely do that. I would love to talk about even going back to the idea that insists on itself. Weirdly, with games, I almost like my favorite games, like Pony Island, or the guy who did he did Pony Island. I think it's called The Hex, and he did Inscription. I don't know if you know the fellow I'm talking about.
Yes, I just finished Inscription, actually.
Great game, right?
Fantastic game, except for it ends.
Is it butt?
It ends way too abruptly, and it felt like there should be a whole second half to it that wasn't there. And I'm like, why did you end it like that when there was so much more you could have done with the whole other two? Anyway,
yeah,
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, no, we'll get back to talk about it. I'd love to talk about that. There's a movie. So the first episode I mentioned was on Time Crime. It was Time Machine and Time Crimes. Time Crimes is one of those causal loop, like Groundhog. I don't know if you've seen it, Groundhog Day. Edge of Tomorrow type movies. Oh, sweet. Great movie. There was one actually I saw that I think might be the first causal loop movie that I just found out about. I can't remember the name, but it's from like 1946 or something, which is interesting. I think it's about a lady or dude who like keeps experiencing the same New Year's Eve party or something. That's all I know about it. So that would be interesting with Returnal, because the preview, before we get bogged down another 4 hours of it, but the preview, I'd love to talk about like the idea of like games and sort of insisting, quote unquote, insisting upon themselves, but in a justified way of like why you are taking the actions to do it, which I think roguelikes, one of the reasons I really like them is because of that, is like they sort of explain why you're actually even playing the game. Like in Returnal, you're playing it and you're doing this thing because it's connected to the story, and but other than that, like if you just have like save games and new games and everything, like I feel that they don't necessarily connect as much, so.
The way that roguelikes build upon themselves, and the way that because just as a core concept, a roguelike, if you're unfamiliar, are games that you're typically played in one round or one life, and then you die, and it kind of goes back to the beginning of it, and it's kind of like you said, a loop. It's very much a gameplay loop. And the way that Returnal kind of applies that core roguelike gameplay loop to tie it into the story, and work it into why you're taking the actions that you're taking is one of the best ways I've ever seen it worked into with a roguelike. And Returnal is a lot of roguelikes are they're indie games, and so to play Returnal, which is a triple A beautifully designed title,
beautiful color, well made, so good.
It sounds like we have to do a podcast on the philosophy of roguelikes.
I'd love to. I honestly, I've stopped playing as many games because, just trying to do more video stuff, and like I get sucked into games. So the last thing I played was like the Elden Ring DLC, and I'll probably play Night Ring whenever that comes out.
Cannot wait. It's a roguelike. It is a roguelike.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, isn't it? But yeah, so I'd love to do that, and that would be it'd be really fun. So I guess like two last questions for you. Kind of like two and a half. Like so you said you watched it with your partner. Did they like it?
Yeah, no, my partner actually really enjoyed watching it with me, because my partner is much more of the movie person than I am. It's actually It's very funny. When I mentioned that I was being interviewed for a movie podcast, he's like, why the fuck are you being asked to talk about movies? I can barely get you to watch a movie when I want to watch one.
Let me have him on. Yeah, I'll have him on. Does he want to come on?
Oh God, he would. Yeah, he would love to. Are you kidding?
Let's do it. Yeah, but he's open invitation.
I will pass that along. Honestly, you'll get him to talk about either Electra or Tu Wong Fu. I think he'll either one of those two.
I haven't seen that. I was just talking about Tu Wong. I've always wanted to see Tu Wong Fu. Is Electra? Are you talking about like the Jennifer Garner one? Sick. I saw that when I was a kid. But it's been probably 20 years by. I guess 2004 or something. Yeah, probably almost 20 years.
So he's definitely exposed me to a lot of movies. It was there's some of the ones that have stuck out to me that he's made me watch are Electra. Hackers is another one of his favorites.
Haven't seen it. I'd love to talk about all those.
Tu Wong Fu and The Birdcage is another one.
I haven't seen that one either.
Shouts out to Rick and his immaculate taste in movies that is much better than mine.
Shout out Rick. Also, was Gene Hackman in The Birdcage? That could be Thematic.
Yes, he was.
Timely. Yeah. Rest in peace, Gene.
Yes,
that'd be cool. Yeah.
Was.
Open invitation. I'm actually going to be up in Chicago. I'll be up in Chicago. We haven't decided what the dates are, but if we want to meet, I could maybe do like a live podcast. That might be fun. Do a lecture or something.
Here. Would
cool.
love to.
Sweet.
I'm always down to talk about my silly niche interests, be it depressing movies or weird music or weird video games. It's I'm always happy to pontificate about all my interests and the philosophies behind them.
Do a double podcast with you and your partner too. Is there a movie like that that I could pick that would like cause a conflict? Have you guys disagreed about anything like heavy, like about a
film? Yes. Oh my God. Okay. He and my mother were both like, you need to watch this movie. It is one of the best movies that I've seen in a while. You'll love it. I'll tell you what it is in a second. They were like really pushing for it, and I sat down and watched it. And I like most movies. I cannot remember a thing that a movie I've sat down and watched that I've genuinely hated or been angry that I watched more than this movie. And that is the Jon Favreau movie Chef. I hate it. It is the absolute most nothing burger, worthless waste of my time. Like, I was angry that I watched it, and he was like, "What are you talking about?" And my mother was like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, I have not hated a movie ever as much as I've hated Chef. Mm-hmm. It is awful. So if you want to talk about a movie that will want some conflict, there you go.
I'll pick Chef. I haven't seen it. I'd love to. Yeah, that'd be fascinating.
I hate that movie so much.
I generally love most movies too. That's it's rare for me to really dislike something. I almost don't want to say the last ones I did. Go check out my letterbox if you want to see the real movies I disliked. Cough, Long Legs, and Barbie, and and well, fuck it. We'll just you'll find out either way.
Call them out.
Long Legs, Barbie. Barbie wasn't, I thought it was very weirdly trans exclusionary, and I also thought it was not nearly like critical of capitalism enough. There's this one Subway ad that I could send you that is fucking crazy. That is basically the Barbie movie. It just seemed like a commercial for Mattel, and then like a commercial for also literally the car commercial they did in the middle of it, like Volvo or whatever, when she's like on the highway. Mm-hmm. Long Legs, Barbie, and I can't remember the name. Some movie with Jesse Eisenberg where he's in some suburban house. That's the one. Hated that movie. Yep. Hated that movie. That movie drove me crazy.
Boring.
Well, no, it didn't get lurid enough. So that's the thing about Leave Her to Heaven, and like honestly, a lot of these old movies and all that jazz even that I really liked, and even Synecdoche and whatever. Like, I love it when a movie just really goes there. And to me, like, to represent, like, I was getting like themes in Vivarium of like suburban. Is it anhedonia? Is that the word? Like, I want to be really smart saying that. Maybe
break out the thesaurus.
Yeah, lack of interest, enjoyment, or pleasure from life's experiences, like that, like ennui, like and also just like a struggling relationship of like it's like almost like anxiety about being a parent, but like it didn't get lurid enough in Vivarium, which I thought it just copped out of, and I can't stand that because like Eraserhead is like to me all about if you've seen his anxiety over being a father, and like that movie fucking like goes crazy with it. And so I just really, I don't like movies that don't like, if it is the experience of like you have anxiety about being a parent or like with a kid or like whatever, then like you got to just be honest and explore that. You can't just kind of cower it out, I think. And so I thought Vivarium to me cowered it out. And normally like everything, but we can do Vivarium, Chef, and we'll just have an angry, it may be something that your partner also hates, and have an angry episode.
We'll go through it.
Where's all that jazz for you? So you said Synecdoche is your favorite. Would you recommend this movie to people? You liked it overall, like top 20%, like really good?
I would say that it was. I was very surprised at a lot of aspects of this movie. I was very surprised because I I didn't know too much going in. I kind of expected something like more like Cabaret or Chicago, you know, or like the movie Burlesque. Shouts out to Christina Aguilera in Burlesque.
I haven't seen any of them.
Oh, it's I don't know why I like the movie Burlesque so much, but it's got a catchy soundtrack, and I'm gay, so that's good enough for me, I guess.
Yeah, we all have our reasons.
I mean, no, but for all that jazz, the elements of like the fourth wall breaks and how surreal it is, and you know the way in which it kind of does a similar thing to Synecdoche, New York, with like the cyclicalness of life, you know, with the morning routines every morning, and just like this beautiful and honest portrait of an artist that is just kind of like throwing caution to the wind, and having it catch up to them, and just like the honesty of that. I really enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed the visuals. I enjoyed, you know, every single beautifully choreographed dance number, because there's still a focus on that, but it's not just the dance numbers. It's still telling the narrative, and it uses the dance numbers and the musical numbers very intentionally, you know, and I overall, not to, you know, continue to ramble, because I know that we've been talking for quite a while, but I thought it was a very, very interesting experience watching a movie from 1979 still feel so pertinent and still feel so relatable. And I think that the staying power, especially because, you know, a lot of people think, you know, what's the point of watching, you know, a movie from, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. You know, if, you know, things are so different, but like the true staying power, you know, shows that, like, you know, it's still that there's so much that's still relevant with that film, even today. And so I would indeed, if you're a musical fan, absolutely. If you're a Fosse fan, especially, you know, I
you have health anxiety.
If you have health anxiety, oh my God.
Yeah.
If you have health anxiety, maybe not.
Yeah, don't back to back at the same week with that in Synecdoche. It's a little rough.
Oh goodness, yeah. Synecdoche, New York needs a little bit. You need to breathe after that. I still haven't like sat down and watched that movie with my partner yet, because I'm like it's kind of a lot, and I don't know if we need it right now. But
yeah.
But if you've never seen Synecdoche, New York, if you've never seen you know, all that jazz, they're both very haunting films that might make you think about things that you don't necessarily want to think about, but you might need to think about if you're thinking about them.
For sure. Okay, so what are, if you like these movies, what recommendations would you make based on them? So I'll go first. For me, I think if you liked Synecdoche, watch all that. I mean, if you liked, watch them both. I would also say that, to way back earlier, talked about the genre of like kind of creators like having anxiety about their work and up their own ass. So the other movie, because he's my favorite director, shout out Takeshi Kitano, Hanabi. I would watch a bunch of his other movies first. But he made this movie. He made like a bunch of Yakuza crime movies that are like very romantic and sad. I did the episode on Hanabi last week for him. They're really, really awesome. He was also the biggest comedian in Japan. So he was like kind of like imagine Adam Sandler, you know, is the one I always compare him to. But if he had a whole career where he just directed stuff like Uncut Gems or something like that. But in 2005, he did a movie as part of his like surrealist trilogy called Takeshi's, where he sort of like plays multiple versions of himself, and it's about him like creating art and doing like comedy and movies and everything else that I really like.
You recommended that was I think what your other recommendation was, that wasn't all that jazz when we were kind of initially talking about this. That was
but I think it's harder to. Yeah, I think I was thinking, but it's harder because like I feel like you have to have more of a familiarity with his work for it to hit. All that jazz, I think you can just kind of watch and just get it. I'd never seen
immediately.
Yeah,
especially when the end hit, I was like, oh, I get completely why he suggested this to tie in.
Takeshi's, I think it's rare that I would say this, but I think you probably should see like maybe 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 of his movies before doing that. And speaking of that, now that I say that, the other one I would say is I did review this movie called Youngblood Hawk, which probably, if you've seen that movie and are listening to this podcast, DM me and I'll send you out $1 honesty code, because I can't imagine almost no one's seen it. Me and my brothers and friend have been going through all of the filmmaker Delmer Dave's filmography on Mondays, and we're like 20 films into Delmer Dave's, and probably most people only ever watch like a couple Delmer Dave's movies. Shout out Delmer Dave's. He's a great director, but like he did we've started to notice like a lot of his themes about like come out, and so he did this movie Youngblood Hawk towards the tail end of his career, where it's just basically him having like, if you hadn't seen like 15 to 20 Delmer Daves movies before, it'd be like just a standard melodrama. But if you're operating on the Dave's wavelength, it's like it's also another movie along with like 310 to Yuma. It's also another health anxiety movie, except picture the health anxiety of like a 40s, 50s, 60s like straight dude who like in the movie that he did immediately preceding it, Susan Slade, his daughter has a baby out of wedlock and is like slutting out, so he has a heart attack, and he's constantly having health anxiety in his movies towards the tail end of his career. But it's like weird, like old fashioned 1950s straight guy anxiety, where it's like only because like his character, like only because like his wife, he thinks his wife might be cheating on him, or his daughter's like being promiscuous, is he like that's what triggers his health anxiety. It's like these women are sexually available to other people and not me, and so I'm gonna die. It's like just bizarre dreamy movie. So yeah, we'll do that. We'll do Youngblood Hawk and we'll do Takeshi's, but probably watch 10, 15 movies from each of those guys before you do it. So not that helpful.
I mean, it's interesting that you I will say it's interesting that you give that little caveat too of like the perspective of like knowing the directors. I think is important there. Just like to really fully appreciate it. But in terms of like my recommendations, I would say if you enjoyed Synecdoche New York to dive into some other Charlie Kaufman films, probably start with Adaptation is probably like the closest. It's not as surreal, but you know, a lot of similar, like, you know, wanting, you know, of just being an artist and trying to properly portray something, you know, with, you know, that being a film adaptation, but still like, you know, Charlie Kaufman is a character in that movie.
And his fake brother, right? Nicolas Cage plays both of them.
Yeah, and Nicolas Cage's fake brother, exactly.
Yeah.
So I recommend that. I'd recommend Anomalisa. Anomalisa is a very, very interesting film. It's claymation or stop motion is what it is, and it's like a completely different style, and Tom Noonan plays like a very prominent role if you're, you know, into his work as well. But there's, not to spoil the movie, but like there's multiple characters but only 3 voice actors.
Cool.
And that's a very big point of the movie, and Tom Noonan plays a lot of them that's a very big aspect of it. So
I'll have to watch that with my brother. He's a huge Tom Noonan fan.
Yeah, so, it's high recommend on Anomalisa there, especially if you're a Charlie Kaufman and Tom Noonan fan. And then I also want to say that, you know, if you are some other media that of similar sort of feeling, you know, play Returnal, if any of these movies and the themes of which kind of stick with you seriously, that the story of that game is unlike any video game story I've ever played, and having it unfold for me it's an incredible experience. So I would say Returnal. And then musically, the band Chat Pile, one of my absolute favorites in the entire world, their music is very unabashedly about, you know, American society, especially like, you know, the Bible Belt, and, you know, they're from Oklahoma, and like capturing the, you know, the American underbelly and the hopelessness of that, and like the hopelessness of being a person in this world, comes through very, very prominently in their music. And I think that anxiety, a lot of what we've been talking about, comes through very hard. So as a music recommendation, I'd recommend to check out the music of Chat Pile.
Awesome. I'll definitely do that. Well, cool. Yeah. Any other final thoughts about these 2 movies?
They're immense and they're difficult to get through. But like I said, I think that if there's something uncomfortable that they make you feel, there's probably a reason for you to feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Like I said earlier, I mean, this is a big week for me personally. I was bragging to my therapist, and I think part of it is because these movies wrecked me. And then they wrecked me, and then they forced me to think about a lot of things. And yeah, it was all cool. So, you know, I get that sometimes, you know, Lord knows, sometimes, you know, a lot of my comfort stuff is like, I love a Tom Cruise movie. Yeah, certainly like the just. Yeah, going deep. I love the shattering effects of these type of things. So I'm really looking forward to actually seeing. The other final movie recommendation would be that I haven't even seen, so who knows? But 8.5, I think, is the progenitor of a lot of these. So we're about to watch, I think, with Dolce Vita and 8.5 at the house when my brother gets back from a trip. So yeah, we can
more movies to just absolutely break your soul.
Yeah, if you want movies to break your soul, then yeah, both these movies that we talked about today, and by my estimation so far, any Fellini movie. Well, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess this has been really fun. We'll have to do this again for sure.
I've had a lovely time. I tried my best to be succinct and not ramble too much. I know it's kind of hard to.
You've been great. I don't think I'm even gonna have to edit this really. Like just the one part where I was like I lost my train of thought for like 30 seconds, but this has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. I was really excited to have the opportunity to do something a little different. I'm terminally down for whatever. I've never been interviewed for a podcast like this. I got asked to do a remix for a song recently. I've never done that before, but I'm just like, you know what? If you want, why not? Let's throw ourselves into it. So, I'm happy for the opportunity.
You're a natural at it. Do you have anything to plug? I forgot to say that. Anything to plug or promote?
I was gonna say, if you've enjoyed listening to my voice, I make music under the name Hot Lettuce with an exclamation point at the end. I've got an album out that I put out last year that I'm quite proud of. Go and check that out, wherever music is streaming. I make a lot of music under a lot of different monikers, but that's the main one. So if you check out Hot Lettuce, it'll lead you down the rabbit hole of all the other stuff that I do.
Awesome. I will make sure to include that in the show notes for sure, and link to that. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on. This has been super fun.
Of course, thank you for having me, and I can't wait to inevitably talk to you again for 4 hours about the philosophy of Returnal.
Let's do it. All right, see you.
Make it happen. See ya.